Hey guys, tonight we wander through the fading embers of a once vibrant pantry, where the ghosts of cloves and cardamom still haunt the corners of forgotten cupboards. You are standing in an ancient kitchen, draped in heavy shadows, where the air is thick with the memory of peppercorns and the weight of history, yet your palate finds only the hollow echo of what used to be. You probably won't survive this descent into the blandness of history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Do tell me, where in this vast world are you resting? And what time does the clock strike for you? Imagine, if you will, a time when every morsel carried the weight of a 1,000-mile journey. An era when the very act of seasoning a pot was an invocation of distant lands and sun-drenched shores. In those olden days, the spice trade was not merely commerce. It was a pulse, a rhythmic beating of hearts across the Silk Road, bringing with it the pungent heat of black pepper and the sweet, woody whispers of cinnamon bark. You could almost feel the dust of the caravan trails clinging to the heavy burlap sacks as they arrived at the city gates, each grain of spice representing a triumph over distance and decay. To taste something spiced was to taste the world itself, to feel the warmth of an Indian summer or the sharp aromatic bite of a Persian garden, all contained within a single humble spoonful of stew. There was a reverence in the way the heavy mortar were struck, the rhythmic thud-thult of stone against stone, as peppercorns were crushed into fine, dark dust that promised a complexity of flavor far beyond the reach of modern, sterilized kitchens. The air in these ancient marketplaces was never thin or empty. It was a heavy, textured tapestry of scent, woven with threads of clove, star anise, and the intoxicating musk of nutmeg. To walk through such a bazaar was to undergo a sensory baptism, where the nostrils were overwhelmed by the sheer density of aromatic oils escaping from bruised rinds and split pods. There was no such thing as a subtle aroma in the old world. Every scent demanded your full attention, pulling you into a trance of culinary anticipation. You could see the merchants, their hands stained with the dyes of turmeric and saffron, weighing out precious quantities of goods as if they were measuring gold or fine gems. The value of a single sack of peppercorns was measured in lives lived and oceans crossed, lending a certain gravity to every meal, an understanding that nourishment was a hard-won treasure from a wild and unpredictable earth. In this era, the concept of flavorless was an impossibility, for even the most basic sustenance was kissed by the elements of the earth and the labor of human hands. Consider the humble grain, or the heavy, slow-cooked meats that had been infused with the essence of herbs gathered from the edges of a well-tended forest. There was a certain roughness to the food, a grit and a texture that reminded you of the soil from which it sprang, yet within that roughness lived a profound depth. One did not simply eat to satisfy hunger. One ate to participate in a historical lineage of taste, a continuity of sensory experience that linked the diner to the ancestors who had first discovered the magic of a dried berry or a crushed leaf. The flavors were loud, they were proud, and they possessed a certain jagged edge that kept the spirit awake and the mind engaged with the reality of the feast. Yet, as we look back through the lens of time, we begin to see the first cracks forming in this magnificent edifice of flavor, the slow erosion caused by the creeping need for stability over sensation. The very things that made food exciting, its unpredictability, its seasonal volatility, its intense and sometimes overwhelming potency, were the same things that made it difficult to manage in a growing, more structured civilization. We began to crave a consistency that nature simply does not provide, a way to tame the wildness of the spice and the temperamental nature of the harvest. This was the beginning of our departure from the truly delicious, a subtle shift toward a world where we valued the predictable over the profound. It was a quiet retreat, a slow withdrawal of the soul from the vibrant, chaotic feast into a more controlled and ultimately more sterile existence. Think of the heavy wooden tables of old, laden with platters that were not merely displays of food, but maps of the known world. A single dish might contain the salt of the sea, the heat of the desert, and the sweetness of the tropical grove, all harmonized in a way that required careful, intentional preparation. There was no shortcut to such excellence. There was only the slow simmering of the pot, the patient application of heat, and the careful measurement of precious aromatics. This patience lent itself to a different kind of eating, a slower, more contemplative process where each bite was an exploration. You would sit for hours, the candlelight flickering against the pewter plates as the flavors unfolded on your tongue like a slow-moving story, revealing new layers of smoke, earth, and spice with every chew. As the shadows lengthen in our narrative, we must consider how the very geography of taste began to shrink. The Silk Road, once a sprawling artery of aromatic life, began to feel the pressures of a world moving toward efficiency and mass distribution. The spices that once arrived in small, precious quantities, handled with the utmost care by specialized merchants, were being integrated into larger, more impersonal systems of trade. The mystery was beginning to leak out of the pepper-crusted meats, replaced by the logistical certainty of bulk shipments. While this brought a certain abundance to the common table, it also began to strip away the individual character of each ingredient. The spice was no longer a rare gift from a distant land. It was becoming a commodity, a mere additive in a much larger, more standardized machine. There is a melancholy beauty in remembering those lost complexities, even as we acknowledge that they were often inaccessible to many. We romanticize the intensity of the old flavors because they represent a connection to a world that felt more tangible, more visceral. In our modern pursuit of the uniform and the easy, we have traded the jagged, exciting peaks of flavor for the smooth, flat plains of convenience. The cloves that once stung the tongue with their medicinal heat are now often nothing more than a faint, sugary ghost in a processed biscuit. The saffron, once a liquid sun, is now frequently replaced by cheap, yellow dyes that possess none of its earthy, hay-like soul. We have gained a world of plenty, but we have lost the ability to be truly surprised by our own nourishment. Even the way we perceive the scent of food has changed. Where once a kitchen could signal an approaching feast from 3 streets away, modern kitchens are often muted, their aromas contained and neutralized by the very technologies designed to serve us. The heavy, intoxicating clouds of simmering fat and pungent herbs have been replaced by the clean, odorless efficiency of induction and steam. This lack of olfactory stimulation is a quiet theft, a way in which our sensory world is being slowly leveled, made more even and less interesting. We are living in an age of olfactory silence, where the most profound stories of flavor are being whispered in rooms that have become too sterile to hear them. The textures, too, have undergone a subtle, creeping transformation, moving away from the rugged and toward the uniform. The old world offered a landscape of textures, the crunch of toasted seeds, the toughness of slow-braised sinew, the soft resistance of ripe fruit. Each bite required an active engagement with the food, a physical participation in the act of consumption. Now, we find ourselves in an era of the soft and the processed, where much of what we eat has been pre-masticated by machines before it ever reaches our mouths. This loss of texture is a loss of presence. When food requires no effort to consume, it requires no attention to experience. We slide through our meals like ghosts through walls, barely noticing the substance of what we are taking into our bodies. It is a heavy realization, this slow fading of the culinary lights. To look back at the era of the Spice Road is to mourn not just a lost way of eating, but a lost way of being in the world, a way that was more attuned to the rhythms of nature, more respectful of the labor involved in creation, and more deeply engaged with the sensory delights of existence. We have become masters of the bland, architects of the unremarkable. As we move forward into the history of how this happened, let us carry with us a small flickering flame of that old passion, even as we trace the dark path toward the modern, flavorless void. The journey ahead is one of decline, a study in how the hunger for ease eventually led to a starvation of the soul through the loss of taste. The very concept of hunger has shifted from a biological necessity to a psychological craving, as we nuring ourselves on the high-frequency hits of salt and sugar, while the deeper, more nuanced layers of our palate wither from neglect. We are full, yet we are empty. We are fed, yet we are unfulfilled. This is the great paradox of our age, that in the midst of such unprecedented abundance, we have found ourselves increasingly unable to truly love what we eat. The history of food is not just a history of agriculture and trade, but a history of the human spirit's relationship with pleasure, and how that relationship has been fundamentally altered by the pursuit of the convenient over the exquisite. As you drift closer to sleep, let the memory of those heavy, spice-laden shadows wrap around you like a warm, woolen blanket. Let the imagined scent of cloves and cinnamon settle in your mind, providing a temporary sanctuary from the sterile reality of the present. The world of flavor is not entirely gone. It is merely buried under layers of progress and preservation, waiting for a moment of true, unhurried intention to be rediscovered. For now, let the heaviness of those olden flavors weigh down your eyelids, pulling you into the deep, dreamless slumber where no spice is too strong and no texture is too complex. The path we tread next will take us into the era of salt, the great preserver and the great duller of taste, where the very necessity of survival began to dictate the boundaries of our palates. We shall see how the drive to keep food from rot also drove our senses away from the vibrant and toward the saline, a transition that was as much about chemistry as it was about the fundamental human fear of hunger. The salt was here to stay, but with its arrival, the delicate nuances of the unpreserved world began to vanish, swallowed by the white, crystalline tide of preservation. Sleep now, and let the weight of the spice-laden history settle into your bones as we prepare to traverse the brine-soaked landscapes of the past. The journey is long, and the flavors are fading, but the story remains, etched in every grain of salt and every charred piece of wood from the ancient hearths. We are moving toward the silence, toward the bland, yet we do so with a full understanding of what was lost in the transition from the vibrant to the stable. The embers are low, the kitchen is dark, and the era of unadulterated flavor is but a memory in the wind. Rest your weary head, for even in the most colorless of histories, there is a profound truth to be found in the shadows of what once was. The spice has settled, the dust has fallen, and all that remains is the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the night. As we leave behind the aromatic warmth of the Silk Road, we enter a colder, harsher landscape, one defined not by the scent of cloves, but by the stinging, crystalline bite of salt. Imagine yourself in an era where the greatest enemy of food was not a lack of flavor, but the creeping, silent advance of rot and decay. In this age, the kitchen was no longer a place of culinary experimentation, but a battlefield of preservation, a desperate struggle to hold back the tide of fermentation and mold that threatened to turn every harvest into a useless, putrid mass. The heavy, white weight of salt became the dominant force in our kitchens, a substance so essential for survival that its presence eventually began to overwhelm the very things it was meant to protect. You could almost feel the grit of those ancient salt mines between your teeth, the damp, subterranean darkness where men labored to extract the crystals that would become the architects of our modern, dulled palate. The process of salting was a violent one, a way of drawing the lifeblood out of meat and vegetables through osmosis, leaving behind something tougher, more resilient, but fundamentally changed. To preserve a side of pork or a heavy haunch of beef, one had to encase it in layers upon layers of coarse, gray salt, a burial shroud that ensured the meat would last through the leanest months of winter. As the salt penetrated the fibers, it did not merely stop decay. It fundamentally altered the chemical architecture of the food, breaking down the delicate proteins and replacing the subtle, natural juices with a concentrated saline brine. The texture became dense and unyielding, a transformation that turned a tender feast into a substance designed for endurance rather than enjoyment. You are no eating for pleasure, but for the grim necessity of keeping your strength through the frost, and in that struggle, the original character of the meat is slowly lost to the sea. Think of the great wooden barrels, heavy with brine, lined up in the cellars of coastal villages and mountain keeps alike, each one a tiny salt-saturated world unto itself. Inside these vessels, the transformation was total. Vegetables like cabbage were submerged in a liquid that was both preservative and transformative, giving birth to the sharp, acidic bite of sauerkraut, which, while nutritious, lacked the vibrant, fresh crunch of a summer harvest. There was a certain ritualistic gravity to the tending of these barrels, the checking of the brine levels, the ensuring that no air could penetrate the seal. Yet every action taken to ensure safety was also an action that stripped away nuance. The salt acted as a heavy curtain, falling over the subtle notes of the earth, leaving only the sharp, stinging note of sodium to sing. We were learning, even then, how to trade complexity for longevity, how to sacrifice the ephemeral beauty of freshness for the cold security of the preserved. In the great salt works of the earth, where the air is thick with the dust of evaporated seas, the sheer scale of this preservation effort begins to reveal its toll on our sensory memory. The reliance on salt created a culinary monoculture of sorts, where every dish, no matter how well-intentioned, was anchored by that same pervasive mineral heaviness. Whether it was fish from the North Sea or venison from the deep woods, the common denominator was the sharp, crystalline sting that lingered on the tongue long after the meal had ended. It created a palate that was becoming accustomed to extremes, either the overwhelming presence of salt or the stark absence of it, eroding the middle ground where subtle flavors reside. The middle ground is where nuance lives, and as we move toward a world dominated by brine and salt-cured goods, that middle ground began to erode like a shoreline under a relentless tide. There was a certain grimness to the way salt changed our relationship with the seasons. We were no longer truly eating of the spring or the summer, but were instead consuming the preserved ghosts of those seasons throughout the autumn and winter. A piece of salted fish in February is a memory of a summer catch, filtered through layers of sodium and thyme, stripped of its freshness, and replaced by a concentrated, leathery intensity. This detachment from the immediate, living moment of harvest began to dull our connection to the natural cycle of growth and decay. We were eating food that had been arrested in its development, frozen in a state of salt-induced stasis, which meant we were no longer engaging with the true, changing face of nature, but with a static, preserved version of it. Consider the heavy, labor-intensive way in which salt was handled, the massive blocks being broken, the fine grains being sifted, and the sheer volume required to sustain a nation through a period of famine. The economic power of salt was immense, shaping the very roots of trade and the rise of empires. Yet this macro-level importance masked the micro-level erosion of our taste buds. As we became more efficient at transporting and storing salt, we became more accustomed to its dominance. The palate, much like a muscle, adapts to the weight it is regularly asked to carry. As we carried the heavy burden of salted foods, our ability to perceive the delicate, unpreserved flavors began to atrophy. We were training ourselves to ignore the subtle and to crave only the sharp. Even the way we prepared our meals was dictated by this salt-centric reality. There was little room for the delicate infusion of fresh herbs when everything had to be robust enough to withstand the curing process. A herb that might have been wonderful in a fresh summer stew would wilt and lose its soul within a salted crock. Therefore, the culinary repertoire of the era leaned toward flavors that could stand up to the brine stronger, more aggressive aromatics that could pierce through the salt, such as garlic, mustard, or heavy peppercorns. This created a cycle where we only used flavors that were strong enough to survive preservation, further pushing the boundaries of our palate away from the delicate and toward the intense. The very concept of seasoning began to shift during this era. It moved from being an additive of complexity to being a method of fortification. To season something was not necessarily to add a new dimension of flavor, but to ensure its survival against the inevitable rot. There is a profound difference between a chef using spice to enhance a dish and a cook using salt to defend a meal. This defensive posture in cooking, this preoccupation with safety over sensation, is where the seeds of our current culinary blandness were sown. We began to prioritize the structural integrity of the food over its sensory delight, a habit of thought that would eventually find its way into every corner of our global food system. As you contemplate these salt-crusted histories, feel the heaviness of those brine-soaked barrels pressing against your mind. Imagine the damp, cold cellars where the only scent is the sharp, medicinal sting of salt and the faint, sour note of fermentation. It is a world of survival, a world where the tongue is often overwhelmed by the very substance meant to save it. This was the first great era of culinary compromise, the moment when we decided that staying alive was more important than tasting the true essence of our food. The salt stayed with us long after the need for such extreme preservation had passed, lingering in our habits and our cravings, a ghostly presence in every processed morsel we encounter today. The transition from the spice-laden era to the salt-dominated era was not an overnight event, but a slow, creeping colonization of the palate by the crystalline white tide. It was a gradual surrender, one batch of cured meat at a time, one salted cabbage after another. We were slowly losing the ability to appreciate the ephemeral, the fresh, and the fleeting as we embraced the permanent, the preserved, and the saline. The tragedy of this era is not that it lacked flavor, but that its flavors were so heavily weighted by the necessity of preservation that they eventually began to obscure the very nature of what was being preserved. As we prepare to move forward, let the image of those salt-stained hands and heavy, brine-filled barrels fade into the shadows. The era of salt was a necessary chapter in our survival, but it was also the first step on the long road toward the loss of the culinary soul. We have moved from the vibrant, unpredictable spice roads to the stable, but much more predictable world of the brine. But even as we settle into this period of stability, another, even more transformative force is gathering strength in the distance, a force that would move us away from the manual labor of preservation and toward a new mechanical era of production. The salt will remain a permanent fixture in our history, but it is about to be joined by something much more efficient, much more standardized, and much more capable of altering the landscape of flavor on a global scale. We are moving toward the machines, toward the steam-driven mills and the iron-clad cans, where the hand of the artisan will begin to be replaced by the cold, rhythmic precision of the factory. Prepare yourself for the sound of gears and the hiss of steam as we enter the era where the struggle for survival is replaced by the drive for mass production. Let your thoughts drift now to the heavy, iron-driven machinery that is beginning to stir in the distance. The world is changing, becoming faster, more uniform, and more disconnected from the slow, rhythmic cycles of nature and salt. The era of the brine is drawing to a close, and the era of the machine is about to begin. Rest now as the memory of the salt-crusted world recedes. Let the weight of that history settle, and prepare for the next chapter of our long, fading journey through the annals of taste. The darkness is deep, and the story continues, even as you drift toward sleep. The transition from the salt-caked cellars of the past to the rhythmic, clanking workshops of the Industrial Revolution marks a profound turning point in our culinary history, a moment where the struggle against decay was replaced by the pursuit of infinite, standardized abundance. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a great, soot-covered city at the dawn of this new age, where the air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and the heavy, oily scent of machine grease. The quiet, seasonal rhythms of the farm and the salt mine are being drowned out by the relentless, percussive beat of the steam engine. This is not merely a change in how we make things. It is a fundamental shift in how we perceive food itself. The individual, the local, and the artisanal are being swept away by a tide of iron and steam, replaced by a system that prizes uniformity, speed, and scale above all else. In this new era, the concept of the meal began to undergo a radical transformation, as food was no longer something produced in small, seasonal batches, but something that could be manufactured in vast, impersonal quantities. The rise of the factory system meant that ingredients could be processed, refined, and packaged with a level of consistency that had never before been possible. This sounds like progress, and indeed, it brought much-needed stability to a growing urban population. But there was a hidden cost to this efficiency. In the pursuit of a product that looked and tasted exactly the same every single time, we began to strip away the very characteristics that made food interesting: its texture, its unique origin, and its relationship to a specific time and place. The machine does not care for the subtle differences between a well-tended summer tomato and an early autumn one. It only cares for a standardized input that can be processed at high speed. The invention of the tin can, perhaps the most significant culinary technology of this period, was a triumph of engineering that fundamentally altered our relationship with time and distance. Before the can, food was bound by its ability to survive transport. After the can, food could be sent anywhere, preserved in an airtight metallic tomb. This allowed for the feeding of armies on long campaigns and the sustenance of growing cities far from their agricultural heartlands. But it also introduced a new kind of culinary disconnect. When you open a tin, you are not opening something that was harvested recently. You are opening something that has been captured in a moment of industrial perfection and held in stasis by the power of heat and metal. The flavor is no longer an expression of the Earth's current state, but a standardized, repeatable experience designed to be identical whether consumed in London or Calcutta. As these machines began to churn, they brought with them a new kind of refinement: the ability to pulverize, sift, and bleach ingredients into ultra-pure, ultra-uniform states. Flour, once a gritty, variable product of local mills, became a white, powdery substance, stripped of its bran and germ, its character erased in the pursuit of a smooth, predictable texture. Sugar, once a rare and precious luxury, was now being produced on an industrial scale, its sweetness becoming a ubiquitous, blunt instrument of flavor. This era saw the birth of the refined diet, where the complex, textured reality of whole foods was replaced by a sanitized, more easily digestible, but ultimately less interesting version of nourishment. The very act of processing food became a way of removing its impurities, when in reality, those impurities were often the most flavorful and nutritious parts of the ingredient. The landscape of the kitchen itself began to change as the tools of production moved from the hearth and the mortar to the factory and the mill. The artistry of the cook, which relied on a deep understanding of the subtle variations in ingredients, was being challenged by the standardized outputs of the industrialist. If the flour is always the same, if the sugar is always the same, if the canned meat is always the same, then the need for culinary intuition begins to wane. We were moving toward a world where cooking could become a matter of following precise, mechanical instructions, a process of assembling pre-processed components rather than transforming raw, living ingredients. This was the beginning of the loss of culinary agency, a slow retreat from the creative act of cooking into the passive act of reheating and reassembling. The sheer scale of this new production created an illusion of infinite abundance, a sense that food was no longer a precious, seasonal gift, but a commodity to be bought, sold, and replenished at will. This abundance, however, was a hollow one. It was an abundance of the same, an abundance of the uniform. The variety of local, heirloom varieties of vegetables and grains began to dwindle as farmers were pressured to grow only those crops that could survive the rigors of industrial processing and long-distance transport. We were trading biodiversity for efficiency, sacrificing the rich, complex tapestry of global flavors for a much more limited palette of hardy, standardized crops. The world was becoming more fed, but it was also becoming significantly more bland. Think of the great steam-powered mills that lined the riverbanks, their massive rollers crushing grain with an indifferent mechanical strength. These mills were the heart of this new era, pumping out the building blocks of a standardized diet at a rate that far outstripped the capacity of any human hand. The sheer volume of output was staggering, yet it felt strangely empty, as if the life had been crushed out of the grain along with its husk. There was no soul in the mill, no connection to the soil or the season. There was only the relentless rhythmic motion of the gears and the heavy, dusty output of a product designed for the mass market. This was food stripped of its history, reduced to a mere unit of caloric value. The rise of the urban working class also played a crucial role in this shift, as the need for quick, cheap, and easy-to-prepare food became paramount. For a laborer working long hours in a factory or a mine, there was little time or energy for the slow, careful preparation that characterized previous eras. The industrial era provided the perfect solution: canned goods, refined grains, and mass-produced staples that could be consumed with minimal effort. This convenience, while necessary for the survival of the urban proletariat, furthered the decline of culinary complexity. We were creating a way of eating that prioritized speed and caloric density over flavor and nutrition, setting the stage for a future where our food would become increasingly processed and increasingly hollow. Even the sensory experience of food began to flatten during this period. The vibrant, often unpredictable textures of freshly prepared meals, the crunch of a crust, the tenderness of a slow-cooked meat, the juiciness of a ripe fruit were being replaced by the more uniform, often mushy textures characteristic of canned and highly processed goods. The mouthfeel of food was becoming standardized, losing the jagged, interesting edges that keep the palate engaged. We were entering an era of smoothness, where the goal was to create a product that was easy to chew and swallow, further removing the physical engagement required to truly experience what we were eating. As you contemplate this industrial transformation, feel the weight of the soot and the heaviness of the iron. Imagine the loss of the small, the local, and the unique in the face of this massive mechanical tide. The era of the machine is an era of disappearance. The disappearance of the artisan, the disappearance of the season, and the disappearance of the flavor itself. We have gained the ability to feed millions, but we are slowly losing the ability to nourish ourselves with anything of true substance or character. The shadows of the factories are long, and they cover much of what we once called delicious. As we move forward through this history, we will see how this drive for efficiency and standardization would eventually lead us into an even more profound era of loss, an era where sweetness itself became a tool of mass-scale deception, and where the very concept of flavor was further eroded by the rise of a new, pervasive, and overwhelmingly sugary force. The gears continue to turn, the steam continues to hiss, and the world of the artisanal is being buried under layers of tin and iron. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the industrial machine meets the chemist's laboratory, and where we begin to see how sweetness was used to mask the deepening blandness of our modern age. Rest now in the quiet spaces between the mechanical beats. Let the image of the soot-stained factory fade, and prepare for the arrival of a new, more insidious era of culinary decline. The journey is far from over, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the night. The era of the machine is setting into its long gray twilight, and we are left to wonder what remains of the flavor that once was. Sleep and let the history settle. As the soot of the industrial age begins to settle upon our memories, a new, more insidious substance begins to rise from the factory floors and the sprawling plantations. A fine, white, crystalline shroud that promises pleasure, but delivers only a profound, sugary numbness. We have moved from the heavy, metallic era of iron and steam into an era of sweetness. Not the subtle, nuanced sweetness of a ripe berry or a drizzle of wild honey, but a pervasive, aggressive, and ubiquitous sweetness that seeks to coat every corner of our culinary existence. Imagine a world slowly being buried under a layer of fine white dust, a desert of sugar that grows more vast with every passing decade. This is the era of the great encroachment, where the very concept of flavor began to be replaced by the singular, overwhelming note of sucrose, and where the complexity of the palate was sacrificed on the altar of a quick, easy, and addictive gratification. In the olden days, sugar was a rare and precious treasure, a medicinal curiosity that arrived in tiny, precious quantities alongside the spices of the Silk Road. To taste something sweet was to experience a rare event, a deliberate luxury that was savored with reverence and used sparingly to highlight, rather than hide, the underlying flavors of a dish. It was a bright, singular note in a complex symphony. But as the industrial machine mastered the art of extraction and refinement, this treasure was transformed into a common commodity, a cheap and abundant filler that could be added to anything, anywhere, at any time. The transition from a rare luxury to a ubiquitous staple was not merely an economic shift, it was a sensory catastrophe. As sugar became easier to obtain, it became easier to overuse, and as it was used more heavily, its ability to mask the deepening blandness of our food increased exponentially. Think of the way sweetness acts upon the tongue. It is a bold, frontal assault, a flavor that arrives with great force and lingers with a heavy, cloying persistence. In the early stages of this encroachment, sugar was used to enhance the existing flavors of a dish. But as the quality of our ingredients began to decline due to industrial processing, sugar took on a new, darker role. It became a masking agent. When the meat was too processed, when the grain was too refined, when the fruit was too far from its peak, there was a simple, effective solution: drench it in sweetness. The sugar acted as a veil, a heavy, white curtain drawn across the face of a lackluster ingredient, preventing the diner from noticing the lack of depth, the absence of texture, or the loss of character. We began to use sweetness to hide our culinary failures, creating a cycle where we nobler sought more sugar to cover even greater deficiencies in the food itself. The physiological impact of this shift cannot be overstated. We were effectively training our palates to ignore anything that did not possess a certain level of high frequency, sugary intensity. The subtle, bitter notes of dark chocolate, the sharp, acidic sting of a well-aged vinegar, the earthy, grounded musk of a root vegetable, all of these were gradually pushed into the shadows by the sheer, bright dominance of sugar. Our taste buds, once accustomed to navigating a complex landscape of varied sensations, began to lose their sensitivity to the subtle and the nuanced. We became accustomed to a certain baseline of sweetness that was much higher than anything our ancestors would have recognized. This created a sensory threshold that grew ever higher, requiring more and more sugar to achieve the same level of satisfaction, leading us deeper into a desert of our own making. Consider the sheer scale of this transformation in the context of global trade. The rise of the sugar plantations was a dark and heavy chapter in human history, built on labor and exploitation. Yet its culinary legacy is one of an unparalleled, systemic alteration of the human appetite. The massive influx of cheap, refined sugar into the diets of the working classes provided a quick burst of energy, a necessary fuel for those toiling in the factories, but it also brought with us a fundamental change in our relationship with nourishment. We were no longer eating for the slow, sustained pleasure of a balanced meal. We were eating for the rapid, dopamine-driven hit of a sugary treat. The meal was becoming a series of peaks and valleys, of intense sweetness followed by the hollow crash of depleted energy, a rhythmic instability that replaced the steady, reliable nourishment of the past. There is a certain melancholy in observing how the texture of our food also began to succumb to this sweet invasion. The crystalline structure of refined sugar, while providing a pleasant initial crunch, often dissolves into a smooth, syrupy consistency that contributes to the overall softness and uniformity that we had discussed in previous sections. As sugar was integrated into everything from breads to sauces to meats, it contributed to a loss of the structural integrity of food. It acted as a binder, a lubricant, a way to create a more homogeneous, easier to swallow substance. The food was becoming less of an obstacle to be chewed and navigated, and more of a liquid or semi-solid mass that could be consumed with minimal effort, further eroding the physical engagement required to truly experience flavor. As you drift through these thoughts, imagine the kitchens of the 19th and 20th centuries, where the heavy scent of boiling syrups and the fine dust of refining mills began to permeate the very air of the domestic sphere. The pantry was no longer a collection of dried herbs and salted meats, but a growing repository of white, powdery substances and thick, dark syrups. The very architecture of our recipes was being rewritten, with sugar becoming a foundational element rather than an occasional accent. This rewrite was not happening through a single dramatic decree, but through the slow, incremental addition of sweetness to every conceivable category of food, until the distinction between sweet and savory began to blur in the face of a pervasive, sugary monoculture. This blurring of boundaries is perhaps one of the most profound losses of the sugar era. In a truly vibrant culinary tradition, the tension between sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami provides the necessary friction that makes a meal memorable. But as sweetness became the dominant force, it began to dissolve this tension. A dish that should have been a complex interplay of salt and acid was instead turned into a one-dimensional experience of sugary heaviness. The flavor profile was flattened, reduced to a single, high-pitched note that lacked the resonance and depth of a multi-tonal composition. We were losing the ability to appreciate the darker flavors, the fermented, the charred, the bitter, because we were too busy chasing the bright, easy light of the sugar hit. We must also consider the psychological dimension. The way sugar creates a sense of false satisfaction. It provides a momentary illusion of fullness and pleasure, even as it leaves the body craving more. This is the great deception of the sugar era, that we could achieve culinary fulfillment through an abundance of sweetness, when in reality, we were only deepening our nutritional and sensory emptiness. We were building a house of cards, where each layer of sweetness was designed to cover a growing void of actual substance. The more we used sugar to mask the decline of our food, the more we became dependent on it to find any sense of pleasure at all, creating a feedback loop of increasing refinement and increasing blandness. The imagery of this era is one of white on white, the bleached flour, the refined sugar, the sterilized packaging, all working together to create a world that feels increasingly devoid of color and grit. The vibrant reds of the tomato, the deep greens of the herb, the rich browns of the roasted meat, all are being muted by this pervasive crystalline frost. It is as if a winter that never ends has descended upon the pantry, a permanent frost of sucrose that preserves everything in a state of sugary stasis, preventing the natural, beautiful decay and transformation that characterizes true living food. As we move forward from this era of sweet encroachment, let us look toward the next great loss, the disappearance of the seasons themselves. For all the damage done by the rise of sugar, there was still a lingering connection to the time and place of harvest. But as the industrial machine and the global trade networks became more powerful, they began to break even that last remaining link. We were moving toward a world where the calendar no longer mattered, a world where every fruit and vegetable could be available at any moment, regardless of the weather or the soil. The end of seasonality would be the final blow to the true understanding of food, completing the journey from the vibrant, unpredictable feast to the sterile, unchanging, and ultimately flavorless void. The sugar has settled, leaving a fine, white residue on our historical memory. The sweetness lingers, heavy and cloying, as we prepare to transition into the era where time itself lost its meaning in the pursuit of a global, year-round, and utterly characterless abundance. Prepare yourself for the loss of the cycle, the loss of the harvest rhythm, and the arrival of a world that is always, and therefore, never, truly fresh. The shadows are lengthening, and the era of the seasonal feast is fading into the twilight of the supermarket aisle. Rest now in the quiet aftermath of the sugar's peak. Let the memory of those lost, sharp flavors settle into the deep corners of your mind as we prepare to traverse the era of the permanent, seasonless harvest. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the stillness of the night. In the olden days, the rhythm of life was dictated by the pulse of the earth, and the kitchen was the primary stage upon which this cosmic drama was performed. There was an inherent, visceral excitement in the arrival of the first summer peach. Its skin warm from the sun, its flesh so heavy with juice that it seemed to hold the very essence of July within its core. Conversely, there was a certain somber comfort in the return of the root vegetables and the preserved meats of winter, a culinary recognition of the world retreating into itself. To eat seasonally was to participate in a shared temporal experience with all living things. You were eating the present moment. There was no deception, no technological trickery involved, only the honest, unadorned reality of what the soil and the weather had permitted to grow during that specific window of time. But as we entered this new era of refrigerated shadows, a silent thief began to strip away the context of our meals. The advent of large-scale refrigeration and the development of the cold chain, that invisible, frozen artery of transport, meant that food could be plucked from its peak and held in a state of artificial, icy stasis. We learned how to transport the delicate, the perishable, and the ephemeral across oceans and continents without them ever truly experiencing the passage of time. The technology was a triumph of human ingenuity, yet it acted as a veil of frost over our culinary consciousness. We could suddenly have strawberries in the dead of winter, but these were not the vibrant, sun-drenched fruits of summer. They were pale, watery ghosts, grown in controlled environments or shipped through refrigerated darkness, stripped of the very seasonal character that gives them their soul. This erasure of the seasons brought with it a profound psychological flattening. When everything is available all the time, nothing is truly special. The anticipation that once drove our culinary passion, the longing for the first tender asparagus, or the dread and subsequent relief of the final harvest begodes to wither. We lost the ability to feel the arrival of a flavor because the arrival had been engineered into a permanent, unmoving state. The joy of eating became disconnected from the joy of living through a cycle. We were no longer celebrating the triumphs of the harvest, but merely participating in the routine maintenance of a global automated pantry. We became spectators to a feast that never changes, a buffet that exists outside of time, and in doing so, we lost the ability to be truly surprised by our own nourishment. Consider the impact on the very texture and aroma of our food. A fruit or vegetable at its seasonal peak possesses a complexity of flavor born from its struggle with the elements. The heat of a dry spell, the abundance of a rainy week, the gradual ripening under a specific intensity of light. This environmental struggle creates a unique chemical fingerprint, a depth of character that is impossible to replicate in a temperature-controlled greenhouse or during a long, refrigerated transit. When we bypass the season, we are bypassing the experience. We are consuming food that has been optimized for durability and transportability rather than for its sensory peak. The result is a pervasive blandness, a fruit that looks perfect, uniform, and unblemished, but which tastes of nothing more than water and cold air. The landscape of our local markets began to transform from a vibrant reflection of the surrounding ecology into a homogenized mirror of a globalized industrial standard. The local farmers' market, once a place where the very contents of the stalls changed with every passing week, began to struggle against the sheer, unchanging convenience of the supermarket aisle. In the supermarket, the shelves are a lie. They present a permanent artificial summer, a frozen moment in time that ignores the frost outside the glass doors. This creates a profound disconnect between our physical reality and our culinary reality. We walk through a blizzard while purchasing tropical mangoes, and in that cognitive dissonance, we lose our footing in the natural world. We are eating in a vacuum, a temporal space where the weather of the earth and has no bearing on the contents of our mouths. Furthermore, the loss of seasonality led to a decline in culinary creativity. In the olden days, the chef or the home cook was forced to be an artist of necessity, working with what was available. finding ways to transform the humble seasonal ingredient into something extraordinary. The constraints of the season provided the very framework for innovation. The way one prepared a cabbage in November is vastly different from how one prepares it in May. But when the constraints are removed and every ingredient is always present, the need for such creative adaptation begins to vanish. Cooking becomes less about responding to the environment and more about the mere assembly of pre-packaged, seasonless components. The art of the seasonal transformation has been replaced by the science of the permanent inventory. There is also a subtle nutritional tragedy in this loss. The peak of a fruit's ripeness is often when its nutrient density is at its highest, a culmination of all the minerals and sugars gathered throughout its growth cycle. By harvesting early to ensure survival during long-distance transport, we are essentially eating infant food products that have been plucked before they have had the chance to fully develop their chemical complexity or their vitamin wealth. We are filling our bodies with calories that are structurally sound, but nutribly hollow. Much like the way we discussed the refinement of grains in previous sections, we are consuming the appearance of health without the substance of a ripened seasonal harvest. As you drift through these thoughts, imagine the once vibrant orchards and fields, now parting ways with the ancient rhythmic dance of decay and rebirth. See the heavy, dark clouds of autumn being ignored by the brightly lit, climate-controlled aisles of the modern world. The loss of seasonality is a slow, quiet erasure, a way of smoothing over the jagged, interesting edges of the year until everything is a flat, unmoving plain. We have achieved a kind of temporal immortality for our food, but it is a hollow immortality. Like a pressed flower in a book, it retains its shape, but it has lost its life, its scent, and its connection to the living, breathing world. The tragedy deepens as we realize that this loss of seasonality was not just about taste, but about our very identity as inhabitants of the earth. Our traditions, our festivals, our folklore, and even our very sense of time were all built upon the foundations of the seasonal harvest. When we decoupled food from the calendar, we began to decouple ourselves from the planet. We became a species that could exist anywhere, eating anything at any time, yet increasingly feeling like we belong nowhere, because we have removed the most fundamental link between our survival and the natural cycles of the world. As we prepare to move into the next stage of this decline, let us reflect on how this loss of the seasonal rhythm prepared the way for an even greater homogenization. Of this process where not only the time of eating changed, but the very identity of the food itself began to blur. We are moving from a world where the season dictated the menu to a world where global trade networks dictate a single, universal, and utterly characterless menu for the entire planet. The local flavor is being swallowed by a global standardized tide. The frost of the refrigerated era is thickening, obscuring the faces of the local harvests and leaving behind only a uniform, pale landscape. The seasonal feast is becoming a ghost, a memory of a time when we truly knew what month it was by the taste on our tongues. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the disappearance of the season meets the rise of global trade, and where the unique culinary identities of different lands are smoothed away into a single, bland, and convenient global standard. The lights in the supermarket never dim, and the seasons never turn within its walls. There is only the eternal, sterile glow of the present moment. Rest now, as the memory of the harvest's rhythm fades into the quiet, unmoving shadows of a world without time. Sleep and let the weight of the seasonless world press upon your eyelids as we prepare to traverse the era of global trade homogenization. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the stillness of the night. As we left behind the frozen, seasonless void of the refrigerated era, we stepped into an even more expansive and unsettling landscape, a world where borders began to dissolve not through peace or unity, and not through the sharing of culture, but through the relentless mechanical efficiency of global trade. If the loss of seasonality removed the when from our meals, then the rise of global homogenization began to erase the where. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, brightly lit terminal, looking out over a sea of identical metal containers, each one a nameless, characterless cell, holding the same standardized goods destined for every corner of the map. This is the era of the Great Erasure, where the unique culinary fingerprints of distant lands were being systematically smoothed away by the sheer weight of logistics and the intoxicating, seductive promise of convenience. We moved from a world of distinct, localized flavors to a world that was becoming one single, vast, and utterly unremarkable pantry. A global supermarket where everything is available everywhere, but nothing truly belongs to any specific place. In the olden days, the very identity of a dish was inseparable from the geography that produced its ingredients. To eat a meal in a coastal village was to taste the salt, the seaweed, and the specific oily richness of the local catch. To eat in the high mountains was to experience the hardy grains, the cured meats, and the sharp, resinous herbs of that particular altitude. There was a profound, unshakable sense of place in every bite, a culinary way of anchoring oneself to the earth beneath one's feet. This is what we call terroir, the taste of the soil, the climate, and the tradition working in a delicate, localized harmony. But as the great arteries of global trade expanded, this concept of terroir began to wither under the pressure of mass distribution. As ingredients were plucked from their native soils and shipped across oceans in climate-controlled steel boxes, they were stripped of their connection to their origin, becoming mere commodities, units of weight and volume that could be substituted, replaced, or ignored as long as they met a standardized price point and a specific level of durability. The rise of the container ship was perhaps the most silent and effective architect of this culinary erasure. These massive iron leviathans, carrying thousands of identical metal boxes, transformed the ocean from a barrier between distinct cultures into a high-speed conveyor belt for mass-produced goods. The sheer scale of this movement made it possible to feed a global population with unprecedented ease, yet it also turned food into something strangely disconnected and ethereal. When a crate of apples arrives in a city thousands of miles from its orchard, the connection to that orchard is lost. The history of the trees, the specific quality of the rain that nourished them, and the hands that picked them are all vanished, replaced by a barcode and a shipping manifest. The apple becomes an object of pure commerce, as interchangeable and characterless as any other piece of cargo. And in this transition, the soul of the fruit is left behind on a distant, forgotten shore. As these global supply chains tightened their grip, the local food markets, the once vibrant hearts of community identity, began to face an existential threat from the rise of the modern supermarket. The supermarket is a non-place, a term for those sterile, homogenized spaces that look and feel identical whether you are in London, New York, or Singapore. It is a temple of convenience, designed to offer the widest possible variety with the least amount of effort. Yet this variety is a profound illusion. While the shelves may be full of products from dozens of different countries, they are all products that have been selected for their ability to survive long-distance travel and remain visually appealing in a refrigerated aisle. The selection is not determined by what is delicious or culturally significant, but by what is robust, standardized, and profitable. We traded the messy, unpredictable, and deeply flavorful abundance of the local market for the clean, predictable, and utterly characterless abundance of the global aisle. This homogenization led to a slow, creeping death of regional culinary specialties, the lost ingredients that once defined a culture's palate. Consider the specialized varieties of corn, the unique heirloom tomatoes, or the specific, pungent cheeses that could only thrive in a particular microclimate and required a certain way of being produced. As the global market demanded uniformity for the sake of efficiency, these delicate, highly variable crops were pushed to the margins. They were too difficult to grow on a massive scale, too prone to damage during transport, and too unpredictable for the needs of industrial processing. In their place came the hardy, the uniform, and the resilient, the high-yield, genetically standardized crops that can withstand the rigors of the shipping container. We replaced a complex tapestry of biological diversity with a monoculture of convenience, creating a world where the culinary landscape is as flat and featureless as a paved highway. The psychological impact of this loss was profound. As our food became more globalized, our sense of cultural identity began to thin. Food is one of the most fundamental ways in which humans express their history, their values, and their connection to their ancestors. When a culture's traditional ingredients disappear from its daily diet, a piece of that culture's very essence vanishes with them. We began to see the rise of a global palate, a way of eating that is increasingly detached from tradition and instead driven by the trends of mass marketing and the ease of prepared convenience. This global palate is characterized by a preference for flavors that are easily understood, broadly acceptable, and universally produced. The salty, the sweet, and the mildly savory, effectively erasing the more challenging, more complex, and more culturally specific notes of the human culinary experience. There is a certain tragedy in the way convenience has become the primary metric for culinary success. We have been taught to value the food that requires the least amount of thought, the least amount of preparation, and the least amount of connection to the source. This pursuit of ease has led us to embrace processed foods that are engineered for shelf stability and mouthfeel rather than nutritional or sensory depth. The convenience of a pre-packaged meal is the convenience of disconnection. It allows us to consume without ever having to engage with the reality of production, the labor of the farmer, or the cycle of the seasons. This detachment creates a sense of culinary amnesia, where we move through our lives eating products that have no history, no origin, and no connection to the world around us. Think of the great, silent warehouses that now sit on the edges of our city's vast, temperature-controlled cathedrals of logistics, where food is sorted, packed, and redistributed with a mechanical indifference. These are the new heartlands of our food system, but they lack the warmth, the scent, and the life of the old granaries or the village storehouses. In these spaces, food is treated as a unit of data, something to be tracked via GPS and managed through algorithms. The human element, the farmer's intuition, the merchant's pride, the cook's passion, is being systematically removed from the equation in favor of an optimized, error-free flow of goods. This efficiency is undeniably impressive, yet it feels strangely hollow, as if we are feeding a growing population while simultaneously starving our sense of connection to the very substance that sustains us. As you contemplate this vast, interconnected web of trade, feel the weight of the uniformity pressing upon your mind. Imagine the loss of the small, the unique, and the local in the face of this massive, globalized tide. The era of homogenization is an era of disappearance. The disappearance of the regional, the disappearance of the terroir, and the disappearance of the culinary soul. We have gained a world where you can find almost anything anywhere, but we have lost the ability to find something that truly belongs to the ground beneath us. The landscape is becoming one of smooth, unbroken plains of commodity, a sea of identical grains, identical sugars, and identical meats, all moving through the same invisible channels. We are moving from a world of diverse, localized textures and flavors toward a singular, globalized smoothness. The unique edges of our culinary identities are being sanded down by the friction of trade, leaving behind a world that is much more efficient, but much less interesting. As we move forward through this history of decline, we will see how this loss of identity and the push for efficiency paved the way for the next great intrusion, the era of the chemist. We have mastered the art of moving food across the planet. Now, we shall see how we began to use science to fundamentally alter its very essence, using additives and stabilizers to further enhance the convenience and the uniformity that global trade demanded. The container ships continue their silent, rhythmic transit through the dark waters, carrying the seeds of our culinary blandness to every port in the world. The borders are gone, but so is the flavor. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the mastery of logistics meets the precision of the laboratory. The lights of the global terminal never dim, and the cargo never ceases its movement. Rest now, as the memory of local flavors fades into the vast, characterless expanse of the global pantry. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic pulse of the machine. Sleep and let the weight of this borderless, bland world settle upon you as we prepare to traverse the era where science began to rewrite the very chemistry of our food. We have traveled through the vast, impersonal corridors of global trade, where the identity of food was smoothed away by the sheer scale of the shipping container. Now, as we move deeper into the shadows of our history, we encounter a new and even more transformative force, one that does not merely move ingredients across the world, but seeks to fundamentally rewrite their very molecular essence. Imagine yourself stepping out of the bustling, sun-bleached terminal of commerce and into the sterile, unnerving silence of a laboratory, where the air is thick with the scent of ozone and the sharp, clinical tang of antiseptic. Here, the cook's wooden spoon has been replaced by the chemist's glass pipette, and the ancient alchemy of the hearth has been superseded by the cold, calculated precision of food science. This is the era of the chemical additive, a period where we began to use the tools of the laboratory to engineer a version of food that is more stable, more visually perfect, and more intensely palatable than anything nature ever intended, but which lacks the vital, living soul of the original ingredient. In this new, white-coated era, the primary objective was no longer just preservation through salt or smoke, but the achievement of a permanent, unshakable stability through the use of emulsifiers and stabilizers. You can see it in the way modern textures have become strangely consistent. A smooth, unctuous creaminess that never breaks, a sauce that never separates, a spread that remains perfectly uniform regardless of temperature. These are not the natural results of slow-cooked fats or carefully whisked emulsions. They are the products of invisible chemical glues, molecules like lecithin or xanthan gum, designed to force substances that naturally repel each other like oil and water into an unnatural, permanent embrace. While this technology allowed for a much longer shelf life and a more predictable mouthfeel in mass-produced goods, it also stripped away the wonderful, unpredictable breakdown of food. We lost the way a sauce might slightly thicken or thin as it ages. We lost the beautiful, organic movement of textures that once signaled a dish's true age and character. Consider, too, the rise of artificial colorants, the visual deception that transformed our pantries into galleries of impossible neon perfection. In the olden days, the redness of a strawberry or the deep green of a spinach leaf was a fleeting, precious thing, tied to the ripeness and the health of the plant. But as food science advanced, we learned how to use synthetic dyes to create a permanent, unblinking brilliance that never fades. We began to see foods that looked more vibrant than their natural counterparts: bright reds, electric yellows, and deep, saturated blues that seemed almost too perfect to be real. This visual perfection is a hollow triumph. It is an aesthetic of the artificial, designed to catch the eye in a crowded supermarket aisle, yet it often masks a lack of actual nutritional or flavorful depth. We became accustomed to eating with our eyes, a version of reality that was chemically enhanced and visually dishonest, leading us further into a state of sensory confusion where we could no longer trust our own perceptions of freshness. The scent of the kitchen, once a complex tapestry of organic aromas, began to be replaced by the precision of synthetic flavorings and essences. The chemist discovered how to isolate the single most potent aromatic molecule from a fruit or a spice, and then reproduce it in a laboratory setting, creating a concentrated, hyper-intense version of that scent. This was a remarkable feat of molecular engineering, but it came at a profound cost. These synthetic aromas lack the supporting cast of molecules that provide a natural scent with its complexity, the subtle hints of earth, of bitter skin, or of fermented juice. A lab-created strawberry essence might smell intensely of strawberry, but it lacks the nuanced, slightly acidic, and even slightly bruised character of a real berry. We began to surround ourselves with these one-dimensional, hyper-real scents, creating a world that smells much more intense than nature. It feels strangely empty and disconnected from any living source. Perhaps most insidious was the development of preservatives that went far beyond the simple mineral bite of salt. We entered an age where nitrates, sorbates, and benzoates were introduced into our food to halt the microscopic processes of life itself. These substances are incredibly effective at preventing mold, bacterial growth, and oxidation, essentially placing food in a state of chemical suspended animation. While this was crucial for the safety and longevity of global food supplies, it also meant that we were consuming products that were neither truly fresh nor undergoing any meaningful transformation. The natural, healthy cycle of decay, the slow fermentation, or the gentle softening that characterizes aging food was being replaced by a static, sterile state. We were eating food that was technically safe, but which had been stripped of its biological vitality, a substance that was chemically arrested in time. Think of the rise of hyperpalatability, a concept where food scientists began to engineer ingredients specifically to trigger the most primitive reward centers of the human brain. By precisely calibrating the ratios of salt, sugar, and fat, and by using additives to create a specific addictive mouthfeel, they created products that were almost impossible to stop eating. This was not an accident of culinary tradition, but a deliberate application of neurobiology to the pantry. The food was being designed for maximum dopamine release, creating a loop of craving and consumption that bypassed our natural signals of satiety. We were no longer eating to satisfy hunger. We were eating to satisfy a chemically induced compulsion, moving toward a state where the pleasure of the hit far outweighed the actual nourishment or flavor of the food itself. As you drift through these thoughts, imagine the pantry as it was once known, a place of organic, changing, and often messy life now, being replaced by a collection of chemically stabilized, visually perfect, and hyper-palatable objects. The laboratory has entered the kitchen, not with a bang, but with a quiet, efficient application of molecules that smooth over every imperfection and eliminate every risk. We have gained a world of incredible stability and safety, yet we have lost the ability to engage with food as a living, changing entity. The textures are more consistent, the colors are more vibrant, and the flavors are more intense, but there is an underlying sense of something missing, a profound, hollowed-out feeling that comes from eating something that has been engineered rather than grown. There is a certain melancholy in realizing that we have used our highest intelligence to create a lower form of experience. We used the mastery of chemistry to bypass the very challenges that made food interesting. The problem of a fruit rotting or a sauce separating was solved, but in solving it, we removed the tension and the transformation that defined the culinary arts. We are now living in an era where the primary ingredient in much of our diet is not a plant or an animal, but a carefully selected array of additives designed to ensure uniformity and shelf life. The food has become a vehicle for chemistry, a delivery system for stabilized nutrients and engineered sensations, further distancing us from the fundamental reality of nourishment. The complexity of the ingredient list on a modern package is itself a testament to this era of loss. Where once an ingredient might have been flour, water, salt, yeast, it is now a long, intimidating string of chemical names that require a degree in science to fully comprehend. This linguistic barrier creates a profound disconnect between the consumer and the consumed. We no longer know what we are actually putting into our bodies because the language used to describe has become so detached from the natural world. We have replaced transparency with a complex, technical jargon, further eroding our connection to the source of our sustenance. As we move forward through this history of decline, let us contemplate how this chemical mastery prepared the way for the next stage of our disconnection, the loss of our relationship with the soil itself. We have learned how to manipulate the molecule and the flavor. Now we shall see how we began to forget the very ground from which all these ingredients originally sprang. The laboratory has been successful in its mission to stabilize the food, but in doing so, it has made the origin of that food increasingly irrelevant. The white coats of the chemists are receding into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of stable, unmoving, and hyper-palatable ghosts. The era of additive mastery is complete, but the work of erasure is far from over. We are moving toward a world where the concept of the farm is becoming an abstraction, as we prepare to enter the age where we began to forget the very earth that once fed us. The laboratory lights flicker and dim, leaving only the cold, sterile glow of the engineered pantry. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the mastery of the molecule meets the profound forgetting of the soil. Rest now in the quiet, clinical aftermath of the additive era. Let the memory of those intense, synthetic scents fade, and prepare to traverse the era where we began to lose our connection to the very ground beneath our feet. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the stillness of the night. Sleep, and let the weight of this chemically stabilized world press upon your eyelids as we prepare to move toward the great disconnection from the earth. The laboratory lights have dimmed, and as we move away from the sterile precision of the chemist's pipette, we find ourselves wandering into a landscape that is becoming increasingly ghostly. A landscape where the very ground beneath our feet is being transformed from a living, breathing ecosystem into a mere industrial substrate. We have transitioned from the era of chemical manipulation to an even more profound state of amnesia, the disconnection from the soil itself. Imagine yourself standing in a field that looks perfect from a distance, vast, unbroken, and uniform. Yet as you step closer, you realize there is no scent of decay, no presence of worms, no chaotic struggle of life and death within the dark loam. There is only a profound, unsettling cleanliness, a sterile expanse where the earth has been stripped of its complexity to become nothing more than a stage for the mechanical delivery of crops. This is the beginning of our forgetting, the moment when the farm ceased to be a place of intimate relationship with the earth and became an abstract factory of production, leaving us as consumers who inhabit a world of food without any understanding of the ground that birthed it. In the olden days, to understand food was to understand the soil. The health of the harvest was a direct reflection of the vitality of the land. A farmer's life was an intimate, often grueling, dialogue with the earth, a conversation conducted through the manual turning of compost, the careful application of manure, and the observant tending of the worms and microorganisms that lived in the dark, damp recesses of the field. You could see the history of the land in its texture, the rich, black, crumbly richness of a well-tended garden versus the pale, sandy exhaustion of an over-farmed slope. There was a profound sensory connection to the grit under the fingernails, the heavy, sweet scent of damp earth after a summer rain, and the realization that every morsel of nourishment was essentially a captured piece of that very soil. This was a relationship of reciprocity. What you gave to the earth returned to you in abundance. But as the industrial machine expanded its reach into the agricultural heartlands, this dialogue was silenced, replaced by a monologue of chemical inputs and mechanical force. The rise of heavy, ironclad machinery, the massive tractors and harvesters that could cover hundreds of acres in a single day, brought with it a new kind of efficiency, but one that fundamentally altered the structure of the soil itself. These immense weights, pressing down upon the earth with an indifferent, crushing power, began to compact the very life out of the ground, turning porous, aerated loam into dense, lifeless clay. The earth was no longer a sponge for water and air. It was becoming a hardened floor, a compressed medium designed solely to hold plants upright while they were fed via pipelines and sprayed with nitrogen. We were tilling the earth so much as we were processing it, treating the soil as a factory floor rather than a living organism. With this mechanical dominance came the rise of the monoculture, the great green erasure of biodiversity. In the ancestral way of farming, a field was a riot of different species clover intermingled with wheat, herbs growing at the edges of vegetable patches, a chaotic and beautiful tapestry of life. This complexity provided natural resilience. It held pests at bay through diversity and nourished the soil through varied decomposition. But the industrial paradigm demanded uniformity. For the machines to work efficiently, for the harvesters to function without interruption, and for the global markets to receive a predictable product, the field had to be stripped of all weeds and all competing species. The result was a landscape of terrifyingly beautiful monotony, vast, undulating seas of a single crop, stretching toward the horizon, devoid of any ecological friction. This loss of variety in the field mirrored the loss of variety on our plates. As the earth became more uniform, so too did our nourishment. This era also saw the widespread adoption of herbicides and pesticides, substances designed to enforce this very uniformity by eradicating any element of nature that did not fit the industrial mold. We learned how to clean the field, removing the insects, the fungi, and the wild plants that once formed the complex web of the ecosystem. While this ensured a higher yield and protected the primary crop from the whims of biology, it also created a profound, sterile silence in the landscape. The buzzing of pollinators, the scurrying of ground-dwelling creatures, and the microscopic dance of the soil fauna were all being systematically suppressed. We were creating a sanitized agriculture, one that was incredibly productive, but ecologically hollowed out, a system that relied on external chemical life support because it had destroyed the internal, natural life support of the earth itself. As these agricultural practices became more detached from the local ecology, the consumer's connection to the source began to wither through a process of geographic and psychological distancing. The rise of urbanization meant that more and more people were living in concrete environments, far removed from the sight and smell of the growing season. The farm was no longer a place you visited or a reality you witnessed. It became an abstraction, a distant industrial entity located somewhere out there, beyond the horizon of your daily experience. This distance allowed us to ignore the consequences of our food choices. We could buy a tomato without ever thinking about the depletion of the soil in a far-off province, or the heavy application of nitrates that had turned its fields into chemical factories. The food arrived in the supermarket as a finished product, stripped of its agricultural history, presenting itself as an eternal, contextless object. The concept of dirt itself underwent a transformation in our collective consciousness. In the olden days, dirt was the very essence of life, the precious, dark substance that held the promise of growth. But as we moved into this era of sterile agriculture, dirt became something to be washed away, something unhygienic, something separate from the clean, polished world of modern commerce. We began to fear the very thing that nourished us. The grit and the grime of the earth were seen as impurities to be eliminated by the washing stations and the heavy processing of the factory. This psychological shift was crucial. Once we no longer valued the messences of the soil, we lost our respect for the biological processes, the decay, the fermentation, the composting that are the very foundations of fertility. We moved from a reverence for the earth to a desire for its domination and its eventual, sterile disappearance. Even the way we perceived the nutrients in our food began to change. Because the heavy use of synthetic fertilizers could force a plant to grow rapidly and produce large, impressive-looking fruit, we fell into the illusion that the plants were as healthy as ever. We mistook size for substance. We saw massive ears of corn and heavy heads of cabbage and believed ourselves to be well-nourished, failing to realize that these plants were being pumped full of quick-release nitrogen, while the underlying soil was actually being depleted of its complex mineral wealth. The plant was growing, but it was not truly nourishing the earth, and therefore it could not truly nourish us in the same profound, deep-seated way. We were participating in a hollowed-out cycle of extraction, where we were taking more from the earth than we were ever giving back, leading toward an eventual systemic exhaustion. As you drift through these thoughts, imagine the once rich, dark loam of your ancestors being replaced by a pale, exhausted, and chemically dependent medium. See the loss of the worm, the loss of the clover, and the loss of the seasonal decay that once turned death into life. The tragedy of our disconnection from the soil is not just an ecological one, it is a spiritual one. We have lost the sense of being part of a continuous living cycle. We have placed ourselves outside of the Earth's rhythm, viewing it merely as a resource to be exploited rather than a partner to be tended. This loss of connection has left us with a food system that is incredibly efficient at producing calories, but increasingly incapable of producing true, deep, and enduring nourishment. The landscape of our nutrition has become a desert of efficiency, where the only things that grow are the crops we have engineered to thrive in an artificial, nutrient-poor environment. We are building a future on a foundation of depleted earth, a precarious existence that relies entirely on the continuous application of external, synthetic supports. The more we distance ourselves from the soil, the more vulnerable we become to its eventual collapse, as we have forgotten how to care for the very thing that keeps us alive. As we move forward through this history of loss, let us reflect on how this disconnection prepared the way for the next great stage of our decline, the era where even the struggle for survival was replaced by a drive for sheer, unadulteratory efficiency. We have moved from the loss of the soil to the loss of the ritual. We are moving toward a world where the time taken to eat is seen as a waste, and where the very concept of a meal is being eroded by the relentless pressure of a faster, more optimized existence. The heavy machines continue to roll across the vast, silent monocultures, leaving behind tracks in a soil that is becoming increasingly stranger to the touch. The connection is severed. The earth is now just a substrate. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the slow, meaningful rituals of eating are being dismantled by the cold, unyielding demands of the efficiency paradigm. The sun sets over the empty, uniform fields, casting long, lonely shadows across the exhausted earth. Rest now in the quiet of this disconnected world and prepare to enter the era where speed became the enemy of flavor and presence. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the stillness of the night. Sleep and let the memory of the vibrant, living soil settle into the depths of your mind as we prepare to traverse the age of the efficiency paradigm. The heavy, exhausted silence of the disconnected fields eventually gave way to a new, much more frantic energy, the relentless, ticking pressure of the efficiency paradigm. We have moved from an era where we forgot the source of our food to an era where we simply no longer have the time to acknowledge its existence. Imagine yourself standing in a world that is moving at a blurring, mechanical speed, where every second is measured, optimized, and squeezed for maximum productivity. The clock has become the new master of the kitchen, and the hearth, once the slow-burning heart of the home, has been transformed into a high-speed refueling station. This is the era where the dining ritual was dismantled piece by piece in the name of progress, leaving us with a way of eating that is as rapid and unthinking as the machines that drive our economy. We have transitioned from being participants in a slow, seasonal feast to being mere biological engines, pausing only briefly to ingest the necessary fuel before returning to the frantic momentum of the day. In the ancestral way of living, the meal was not an interruption to life. It was the very rhythm upon which life was built. There was a sacredness to the time taken to prepare a dish, the slow, patient simmering of a stew, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the careful tending of a fire. These were not merely tasks. They, too, were meditative acts that anchored us in the present moment. When the food was finally served, it was an event that demanded our full presence and our undivided attention. The table was a place of gathering, a communal space where time slowed down, allowing for conversation, for storytelling, for the deep, unhurried exchange of thoughts and emotions. To eat was to participate in a social ritual that reinforced the bonds of family and community. There was no concept of eating on the go, for the meal was a destination in itself, a sanctuary from the labors of the day. But as the gears of industry began to turn with ever-increasing speed, the sanctuary began to crumble under the weight of optimization. The rise of the urban, industrialized workforce demanded a new kind of temporal discipline, one that prioritized the continuous output of labor over the restorative pause of the meal. The time taken to sit, to converse, and to savor was increasingly viewed as lost time, an inefficiency that hindered the momentum of production. Consequently, the structure of the meal began to compress. The long, multi-course feasts of the past were replaced by shorter, more functional feedings. We began to see the rise of the midday break, not as a period of rest, but as a hurried interval of replenishment. The ritual was being stripped of its social and contemplative layers, leaving behind only the mechanical necessity of caloric intake. Think of the way the very concept of the table has been eroded by this pursuit of speed. Where once the table was the central axis of the home, a place around which all life revolved, it has become an optional accessory, often replaced by the desk, the dashboard, or the counter. We have mastered the art of eating while doing something else, eating while typing, eating while driving, eating while scrolling through the endless stream of information that defines our modern age. This fragmentation of attention is a profound loss. When we eat without presence, we cannot truly taste. The flavors become secondary to the task at hand, and the sensory experience of nourishment is sacrificed on the altar of multitasking. We are physically consuming food, but mentally we are elsewhere, leaving us in a state of permanent, distracted hunger, even when our stomachs are full. The rise of convenience foods, the microwavable, the prepackaged, and the grab-and-go provided the perfect tools for this era of efficiency. These products were engineered to bypass the labor of preparation, allowing us to fulfill our biological needs with minimal time investment. The microwave oven, a marvel of modern technology, became a symbol of this shift, capable of heating food in seconds, yet fundamentally incapable of providing the slow, transformative heat that characterizes true culinary artistry. We traded the deep, complex flavors that emerge from hours of gentle simmering for the shallow, rapid warmth of electromagnetic radiation. We gained time, certainly, but we lost the depth of flavor and the sense of accomplishment that comes from the patient creation of a meal. There is also a profound psychological cost to this loss of ritual. The ritual of the meal provides us with a sense of stability and continuity. It marks the transitions of our day and reinforces our connection to those around us. When we dismantle this ritual, we contribute to a broader sense of fragmentation and alienation. The absence of a shared, slow-paced dining experience makes it harder to maintain the social fabric of our communities. We are eating in isolation, even when we are surrounded by others, because our attention is fractured and our timing is dictated by the frantic pace of our external lives. We have become a species of solitary feeders, disconnected from the communal joy that once made the act of eating a cornerstone of human culture. As you contemplate this era of compressed time, feel the tension of the ticking clock pressing against your mind. Imagine the loss of the slow-cooked memory, the disappearance of the lingering aftertaste, and the replacement of the savory conversation with the hurried silence of the task. The efficiency paradigm is an era of erasure, the erasure of presence, the erasure of connection, and the erasure of the very concept of taking one's time. We have achieved a world of incredible speed, yet we find ourselves increasingly unable to catch our breath or to truly savor the life we are working so hard to sustain. The textures of our food have also been affected by this temporal compression. Much of what we consume in this era of speed is designed for rapid mastication and easy swallowing, soft, uniform, and lacking the structural resistance that requires slow, deliberate chewing. We are moving toward a liquidized or pulverized diet, where the physical effort of eating is minimized to further increase efficiency. This loss of texture is a direct consequence of our desire to move through the act of eating as quickly as possible, further distancing us from the primal sensory engagement that makes food a pleasure rather than just a task. Furthermore, this era has seen the rise of food as fuel, a reductionist view that treats the human body as nothing more than a biological machine, requiring periodic infusions of energy. This perspective strips away the cultural, emotional, and sensory dimensions of eating, reducing it to a purely quantitative process. We measure our success by calories, by macronutrients, and by the speed at which we can replenish them. In doing so, we have ignored the qualitative aspects of nourishment, the joy, the aroma, the texture, and the shared experience that are essential for a truly fulfilled existence. We are fueling the machine, but we are starving the soul. The economic drivers of this paradigm are relentless. The global food industry is built on the ability to provide mass-produced, high-speed sustenance that can be consumed by a mobile, urbanized population. The infrastructure of our modern world, the fast food drive-thru, the convenience store, the vending machine, is all designed to facilitate this rapid, efficient consumption. These are the cathedrals of the efficiency paradigm, places where the ritual is entirely absent and only the transaction remains. We have built a landscape that rewards the quick and the easy, further incentivizing the abandonment of the slow and the meaningful. As we move forward through this history of decline, let us reflect on how this loss of ritual has prepared the way for the next great sensory erosion, the loss of texture. We have mastered the art of eating quickly and efficiently. Now we shall see how we began to engineer food that is even easier to consume, moving from the loss of time to the loss of physical substance and resistance in our very nourishment. The clock continues its relentless, rhythmic ticking, and the meal continues its rapid, unthinking transit through our lives. The era of the ritual is fading into the shadows of the efficient. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the disappearance of time meets the decline of texture, and where the food we eat becomes increasingly soft, uniform, and devoid of all physical character. The lights of the fast-paced world are bright and jarring, leaving no room for the shadows of contemplation. Rest now in the quiet spaces between the frantic beats of the modern era. The journey is long, but for now, there is only the steady, unhurried breathing of the night. Sleep and let the memory of the slow-cooked hearth settle into your bones as we prepare to traverse the age where even the physical presence of food began to soften and fade. We have traversed the landscape of time, witnessing how the frantic pulse of efficiency stripped the meal of its ritual and its respite. Now, as we move deeper into this chronicle of culinary erosion, we encounter a more subtle and perhaps even more pervasive transformation, the slow, creeping decline of texture. Imagine yourself standing in a world where the very topography of your sensory experience is being leveled, where the rugged mountains and deep valleys of flavor are being smoothed away by an unseen hand, leaving behind a vast, featureless plain of softness. If the efficiency paradigm took away our time to linger over a meal, the decline of texture has taken away our physical engagement with it. We have moved from an era of resistance, where food demanded our attention through its crunch, its snap, and its chew, into an era of effortless, uniform smoothness, where much of what we consume requires almost no effort at all to swallow. It is a transition from a landscape of substance to a world of mere consistency. And in this flattening of the mouthfeel, we have lost one of the most vital ways in which food keeps us present. In the olden days, the act of eating was a physical dialogue between the teeth and the ingredient, a rhythmic negotiation of strength and structure. To eat was to encounter resistance. You would meet the defiant snap of a fresh carrot, the resilient toughness of a slow-braised piece of sinew, or the sudden, delightful explosion of a toasted seed. These textures acted as sensory anchors, forcing your jaw to work, your mind to focus, and your palate to navigate a complex terrain of varying densities. There was a certain vitality in that struggle, a way in which the physical labor of mastication served to heighten our awareness of the food's presence. You could not simply drift away during such a meal. The food itself demanded a level of muscular engagement that precluded distraction. The texture was a signal of life, of freshness, and of the fundamental reality of the organic world, reminding you with every chew that you were consuming something that had once been part of a living, structural whole. But as the industrial machine began to refine and pulverize our ingredients, this structural integrity began to vanish. We saw the rise of the ultra-refined, where grains were crushed into powders, so fine they lacked any trace of their original husk or grit, and where even the most robust fruits were processed into smooth, homogeneous purees. The goal was a product that was easy to process, easy to package, and crustially easy to consume. The machine does not care for the jagged edge of a crust or the stubbornness of a fiber. It seeks instead the uniformity of the paste. We began to trade the complex, multi-layered architecture of food for a singular, one-dimensional smoothness. This was a victory for the logistics of mass production, but it was a profound defeat for the sensory landscape of the human palate, as we replaced a rich topography of mouthfeel with a flat and featureless expanse of soft, predictable matter. Consider the rise of pre-masticated food, the concept that the work of our teeth should be done for us long before the morsel reaches our mouths. Through the advent of advanced blending, extruding, and refining technologies, we have created a world where much of our sustenance is essentially a soft, pre-chewed substance. This convenience, while seemingly a triumph of efficiency, has led to a profound physiological and psychological detachment. When food requires no effort to swallow, it requires no attention to experience. We can slide through a meal with the same unthinking ease with which we move through a crowded hallway, barely noticing the substance of what we are taking into our bodies. The loss of resistance is the loss of presence. Without the physical event of a crunch or a chew, the act of eating becomes a passive, almost invisible process, further contributing to the culinary amnesia that defines our age. There is also a subtle, creeping influence of softness in how we perceive quality. In the modern era, there is an unspoken expectation of uniformity, a smoothness that suggests safety and standardization. We have been trained to find anything too tough or fibrous to be unappealable or even suspicious. This has led to a systematic reduction in the diversity of textures available in the average pantry. The wonderful, irregular textures of heirloom vegetables, which might include skin, pulp, and seed in varying degrees of firmness, are being replaced by the engineered softness of standardized, mass-produced varieties. We are moving toward a culinary monoculture of the mushy and the soft, where the goal is to create a product that is universally palatable because it lacks any challenging or distinctive physical characteristics. Think of the impact this has on our sense of satiety, the feeling of being truly full and satisfied. There is a profound connection between the texture of food and our brain's ability to register that we have been nourished. The prolonged process of chewing a textured, substantial meal sends signals to the brain that the act of eating is an ongoing, significant event. This physical engagement helps to regulate our appetite and provides a sense of completion. When we shift to a diet of soft, rapidly swallowed, and easily processed foods, we bypass this regulatory mechanism. We can consume vast amounts of calories in a matter of seconds without ever feeling the psychological weight of having eaten. We are filling our stomachs, but we are failing to satisfy our senses, leading to a state of chronic, hollow hunger that no amount of soft, easy food can ever truly quench. As you contemplate this flattening of the sensory world, imagine the loss of the sound of eating, the rhythmic, percussive crackle and crunch that once accompanied a hearty meal. The soundscape of the dining table has been muted, replaced by the quiet, almost clinical sounds of soft chewing and swallowing. We have silenced the music of texture, leaving behind only a dull, muffled silence. This loss of auditory stimulation is another layer of the sensory erosion we have been discussing. It is one more way in quite how our environment has become less vibrant, less demanding, and ultimately, less interesting. Furthermore, the loss of texture has contributed to a loss of variety and flavor. Texture and flavor are not separate entities. They are deeply intertwined. The way a substance breaks down in the mouth, whether it dissolves, crumbles, or requires slow mastication, directly affects how its aromatic compounds are released and perceived by the taste buds. A crunchy crust provides a sudden release of toasted aromas, while a soft, slow-dissolving fat allows for a long, lingering flavor profile. By smoothing out the textures, we have also smoothed out the temporal delivery of flavor. We have lost the peaks and valleys of taste that occur as different parts of a single morsel are broken down at different rates. The culinary experience has become a flat line, a continuous, unvarying note rather than a complex melody. As we move through this history of decline, let us reflect on how the loss of texture prepared the way for the next great sensory crisis, the paradox of abundance. We have learned how to make food easier to eat. Now we shall see how that ease leads us into an era where the sheer volume of available choice becomes a burden, where the very abundance that should be a blessing becomes a source of sensory fatigue and psychological exhaustion. The landscape is becoming smoother, more predictable, and much less demanding of our presence. The edges are being rounded off, and the resistance is fading. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where we will explore how the ease of modern consumption leads us into a world so full of choice that we eventually lose the ability to find any meaning in it at all. The smoothness of the modern pantry is a heavy shroud, masking the loss of the vibrant, textured world that once was. Rest now in the quiet, soft shadows of this declining landscape. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the steady, unhurried breathing of the night. Sleep, and let the memory of the crunch and the chew settle into your bones as we prepare to traverse the era of abundance and sensory fatigue. As the physical edges of our food have been rounded into smoothness, a new, more psychological weight begins to be felt, the monumental burden of infinite choice. We have moved from an era where texture was lost to a world where the very act of selection has become a source of exhaustion. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a vast, brightly lit labyrinth, surrounded by walls of shimmering plastic and endless rows of identical-looking containers. There is no end to the aisles. There is no boundary to the variety. Every direction you turn presents 1,000 different versions of the same fundamental substance. 1,000 brands of cereal, 100 types of bread, an infinite array of yogurts, all competing for your fleeting attention. This is the era of abundance and sensory fatigue, a period where the sheer volume of available options has paralyzed our ability to truly appreciate any single one of them. You are no longer searching for nourishment. You are navigating a sea of overwhelming possibility, searching for a way to escape the very excess that was promised to be your liberation. In the olden days, the scarcity of choice was actually a form of culinary liberation. When there were only a few varieties of grain, a few types of seasonal fruit, and a limited selection of preserved meats, the decision-making process was simple, almost automatic. You ate what was available, and because your choices were bounded by the realities of the season and the local harvest, you approached those choices with a focused, singular intent. There was no anxiety about whether a better option existed just 3 aisles away. There was only the reality of the food before you. This simplicity allowed for a deep, concentrated engagement with the meal. Because the choice had already been made by the earth and the season, your energy could be entirely directed toward the experience of consumption, the tasting, the savoring, and the appreciation of the flavor. The lack of choice provided a psychological quietude that is utterly absent in our modern, overstimulated world. But as we entered this era of hyperabundance, we fell victim to what psychologists call the paradox of choice. We were led to believe that more options would lead to greater satisfaction, that a wider array of brands and varieties would allow us to find the perfect, uniquely tailored nourishment for our individual needs. Yet, as the number of options grew from a handful to hundreds, the effect was not joy, but a profound, creeping paralysis. The more choices you are presented with, the harder it becomes to commit to any single one. You stand before the shelf, paralyzed by the fear that choosing one brand of jam might mean missing out on a superior version hidden behind another label. This anxiety, this constant, low-level dread of making the wrong choice, drains the pleasure from the act of shopping, and by extension, the pleasure from the act of eating. The abundance has become a weight, a heavy fog of indecision that obscures the simple joy of sustenance. This paralysis is accompanied by a profound sense of decision fatigue. Every time you navigate an aisle, every time you compare labels, every time you weigh the merits of one processed snack against another, you are burning through your mental energy. The modern consumer is constantly bombarded with micro-decisions. Is this organic? Is it low-fat? Is it gluten-free? Is it sustainably sourced? Each of these questions requires a moment of cognitive effort, and as these moments accumulate by the hundreds throughout a single shopping trip, the mind becomes exhausted. By the time you finally reach the checkout, your capacity for discernment is depleted. You are no longer making choices based on quality or desire. You are making them simply to end the process. We have reached a state where we choose not because we have found the best, but because we can no longer bear the effort of searching. Furthermore, this abundance has led to a strange kind of sensory fatigue, where the sheer variety of products actually serves to numb our ability to distinguish between them. When everything is available all the time, nothing holds its significance. The novelty of a new product wears off in an instant because it is immediately followed by 10 other similar products. We are living in a state of permanent, shallow stimulation, where the palate is never allowed to rest or to settle on a singular, meaningful experience. The constant influx of new flavors, textures, and marketing claims creates a kind of sensory noise, a high-frequency chatter that drowns out the subtle, quiet notes of true culinary delight. We are overfed with information and overwhelmed with options, yet we find ourselves increasingly unable to feel truly satisfied by any of them. Think of the psychological impact of this commodity fatigue. In a world of scarcity, every meal is an achievement. In a world of extreme abundance, every meal feels like a mere transaction. We have lost the sense of the special because nothing is ever truly rare. The supermarket aisle has turned even the most exotic fruit into a common, unremarkable object, stripped of its mystery and its hard-won arrival. When you can find mangoes in December, they lose their status as a seasonal treasure. They become just another item on a list, as mundane as a bag of flour or a carton of milk. This loss of rarity has led to a profound devaluation of the eating experience. We no longer celebrate the arrival of something precious. We merely acknowledge the replenishment of an endless inventory. This era also saw the rise of choice architecture, the way products are placed and presented to manipulate our exhausted decision-making processes. The most profitable, highly processed, and sugary items are often placed at eye level, designed to catch your weary gaze during those moments when your willpower is at its lowest. The aisles are engineered to guide you through a labyrinth of temptation, using bright colors and aggressive branding to trigger impulsive, unthinking purchases. You are not a diner making informed choices. You, in many ways, are a subject being navigated through a landscape designed for maximum extraction. This creates a sense of profound loss of agency, as the very act of choosing becomes a choreographed part of a larger industrial strategy. As you contemplate this vast, overwhelming landscape of excess, feel the heaviness of the choice pressing against your mind. Imagine the exhaustion of the endless aisle, the fatigue of the thousand labels, and the hollowness that comes from being surrounded by everything yet feeling as though nothing is truly significant. The era of abundance is an era of depletion, the depletion of attention, the depletion of satisfaction, and the depletion of the soul's ability to find wonder in the simple act of nourishment. We have achieved a world where we can have anything, but we have lost the ability to value anything. The sheer volume of choice has also led to a decline in culinary competence. When everything is available and prepackaged, the need for the skills of preparation, the knowledge of how to combine ingredients, how to balance flavors, how to transform raw materials begins to atrophy. We have become experts at selecting, but we are becoming novices at creating. The skill of the cook is being replaced by the skill of the consumer, a much narrower and less creative way of interacting with the world of food. This loss of competence further contributes to our disconnection from the culinary arts. We are no longer makers of food, but merely navigators of its vast, impersonal, and increasingly bland distribution networks. As we move forward through this history of decline, let us reflect on how this exhaustion of choice prepared the way for the next great visual loss, the modern aesthetic blandness. We have mastered the art of providing an infinite variety of options. Now we shall see how those options have been visually standardized into a singular, uninteresting, and ultimately characterless appearance, as if the very colors and forms of our food were being muted to suit a more uniform and less demanding eye. The aisles are endless, the labels are blurring, and the fatigue is setting in. The weight of too much choice is a heavy burden for any spirit to bear. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the psychological exhaustion of the consumer meets the visual erasure of the product itself. The lights of the supermarket flicker with an artificial, unblinking intensity, casting no shadows of mystery or discovery. Rest now in the quiet, overwhelmed spaces between the decisions. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the night. Sleep, and let the memory of the simple, singular feast settle into your mind, as we prepare to traverse the era where even the visual beauty of food began to fade into a standardized, aesthetic blandness. We have navigated the exhausting labyrinth of infinite choice, where the sheer volume of options threatened to paralyze the very soul of the consumer. Now, as we emerge from that psychological fog, we find ourselves standing before a new and equally unsettling phenomenon, the rise of modern aesthetic blandness. Imagine yourself walking through a gallery of sculptures, but instead of marble or bronze, every piece is made of the same colorless, unyielding plastic. Instead of the dynamic movement of human form, you see only smooth, featureless spheres and identical cylinders. This is the era where the visual landscape of our food has been stripped of its character, its irregularities, and its vibrant, natural imperfections. We have moved from a world where every fruit and vegetable possessed a unique, almost sculptural beauty, to a world where food is visually standardized, engineered to look perfect, yet fundamentally lifeless, as if the very concept of visual interest has been scrubbed away by the clinical hands of industrial design. In the olden days, the visual appeal of food was found in its very imperfection, in the way a sun-ripened tomato might have a slight, irregular bulge, or how a cluster of grapes hung with a heavy, uneven weight. There was a profound beauty in the flaw, for it was the signature of the earth's unpredictable hand. A small bruise on a peach was not a defect to be feared, but a testament to its soft, ripe maturity and the journey it had taken from the branch to the basket. These irregularities provided a sense of depth and reality. They told a story of growth, of weather, and of time. When you looked upon a harvest, you were looking at a collection of individuals, each with its own shape, hue, and character. The visual feast was a complex tapestry of textures and tones, a natural art form that required no human intervention to be captivating. But as the industrial machine sought to optimize the efficiency of the marketplace, it began to demand a new kind of visual order, the eradication of the unique. To ensure that every piece of produce could fit perfectly into standardized crates, to ensure that every item could pass through automated sorting machines without incident, the very shape of our food had to be tamed. We began to select for uniformity, breeding and cultivating crops that grew in predictable, symmetrical forms. The beautiful, lopsidedly shaped heirloom carrot was replaced by the straight, uniform, and utterly characterless root that looks more like a piece of manufactured plastic than a product of the soil. This visual standardization is a triumph of logistics, but it is a tragedy for the eye. We have traded the fascinating diversity of natural form for a monotonous landscape of geometric perfection that offers nothing to the imagination. This aesthetic shift was further reinforced by the rise of modern packaging, which acts as a sterile shroud over the food it contains. Think of the ubiquitous plastic wrap and the rigid, transparent containers that now define the supermarket experience. While these materials are designed to protect and preserve, they also create a visual barrier between the consumer and the actual substance of the food. The light reflects off the smooth, unnatural sheen of the plastic, creating a glare that obscures the true color and texture of what lies beneath. We no longer see the food itself. We see a sanitized, glossy representation of it. This layer of perfection creates an illusion of freshness, yet it simultaneously strips away the visceral, organic reality of the ingredient, leaving us to interact with a shiny, artificial object rather than a piece of living nourishment. The color palette of our food has also undergone a profound and unsettling flattening. In a natural world, color is a dynamic and shifting spectrum, influenced by the precise moment of harvest, the intensity of the sun, and the mineral content of the soil. A field of corn might range from pale gold to deep, permanent amber. A basket of apples could contain shades of crimson, scarlet, and even a dusty, sun-bleached pink. But in the era of aesthetic blandness, we have moved toward a much more limited and predictable palette. The modern supermarket presents us with a highly controlled range of colors. The same bright, unblinking red for every tomato, the same uniform green for every pepper, the same singular shade of yellow for every banana. This loss of tonal variety creates a visual monotony that is as draining as it is uninteresting. We are presented with a world where the color has been stripped of its nuance and reduced to a single, high-frequency signal of readiness. There is a profound psychological consequence to this visual sterility. It contributes to what we might call food blindness. When everything looks the same, when every piece of fruit possesses the same unblemisable surface and the same predictable shape, our brains eventually cease to register the food as something significant or even real. We begin to view the contents of the grocery store not as a collection of life-sustaining treasures, but as a collection of standardized commodities, mere props in a larger, commercialized theater. This lack of visual stimulation leads to a decline in appetite and interest. When there is nothing in the food to catch our eye or spark our curiosity, the act of eating becomes even more of a mechanical, unthinking process. We are visually starved even as we are calorically overfed. Consider how this aesthetic decline has affected our perception of freshness. In the past, the visual cues of decay, the softening of the skin, the change in color, the slight shriveling of a leaf, were essential signals that told us when a food was at its peak or when it had passed its prime. These were the languages of the harvest. But in our pursuit of a permanent, visually static state, we have learned to suppress these vital cues. We have engineered foods that appear fresh for much longer by preventing any visual change from occurring. This creates a deceptive landscape where a piece of fruit can look perfectly vibrant, even as it is internally losing its nutritional and flavorful essence. We are living in an era of visual deception, where the eyes are fed a lie of eternal, unblematic freshness that masks a deeper structural decline. As you contemplate this landscape of plastic perfection, imagine the loss of the true, vibrant colors of a sun-drenched market, the deep, earthy browns, the bruised purples, and the mottled greens that once signaled life and complexity. See how those colors have been replaced by a single, sterile, and unblinking light that illuminates nothing but uniformity. A modern aesthetic is one of erasure. It erases the history of the plant, the impact of the weather, and the hand of the harvester, leaving behind only a smooth, characterless, and ultimately boring surface. We have achieved a visual stability that is easy to manage, but we have lost the very thing that makes the natural world worth looking at. The tragedy of this aesthetic loss is that it mirrors our broader culinary decline. As the food loses its visual character, it loses its ability to engage our senses, to provoke our curiosity, and to anchor us in the reality of the natural world. We are becoming a people who eat without seeing, and who see without truly perceiving. The eye is no longer an instrument of discovery, but merely a tool for identification within a standardized system. As we move forward through this history of loss, let us reflect on how this visual standardization prepared the way for next great sensory erosion, the disappearance of aroma. We have mastered the art of making food look identical and unblemisable. Now, we shall see how we began to strip away the very sense that once signaled its life, leading us into a world where even the air around our food has become silent and scentless. The plastic reflects only a cold, artificial light, and the shapes are all too perfect, all too hollow. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where the loss of visual character meets the vanishing of the aromas that once defined the very essence of the harvest. The lights of the supermarket are bright, but they illuminate nothing of substance. Rest now in the quiet, colorless shadows of this eyrie of blandness. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the night. Sleep, and let the memory of those vibrant, irregular, and beautifully imperfect fruits settle into your mind as we prepare to traverse the era of vanished aromas. We have wandered through the sterile, brightly lit aisles of visual perfection, where every fruit and vegetable possesses an unblemished, plastic-like sheen that denies its own history. But as we step away from the glare of those artificial lights, an even more profound and unsettling silence begins to settle over our senses, not a silence of the ears, but a silence of the nose. We have moved from the era of aesthetic blandness into the era of vanished aromas, where the very air around our food has been stripped of its character, its complexity, and its soul. Imagine yourself walking through what should be a bustling marketplace, yet as you pass by the stalls of produce, the meats, and the grains, there is no intoxicating cloud of scent to greet you. There is only a thin, medicinal, and utterly odorless void. The olfactory tapestry that once draped the world in layers of spice, wood smoke, damp earth, and ripening fruit has been unraveled, leaving behind a world that smells of nothing more than the sterile, cold air of a refrigerated warehouse. In the olden days, to encounter food was to undergo a sensory baptism of scent. A kitchen was never merely a place of heat and light. It was a thick, breathing atmosphere, a heavy mist of aromatic oils and organic essences that could be felt on the skin as much as smelled in the nostrils. You could tell, from several streets away, when a great pot of stew had begun its slow, rhythmic simmer, the scent of bay leaf, peppercorn, and rendered fat drifting through the narrow alleyways like a fragrant ghost. The air was textured with the sharp, pungent bite of onions being sautéed, the sweet, woody whisper of cinnamon bark, and the deep, musky undertone of roasting meats. To walk through an ancient bazaar was to be pulled in 1,000 different directions by competing aromas: the heavy, resinous scent of frankincense, the bright, citrusy sting of dried orange peel, and the earthy, fermented funk of aging cheeses. These scents were not merely background noise. They were the very language of nourishment, signaling to our primal brains the presence of life, energy, and abundance. This olfactory richness provided a profound connection to memory and emotion. For as we know, the sense of smell is the shortest path to the heart of our history. A single breath of wood smoke could transport a person back to a childhood hearth. The sharp, acidic scent of fermenting cabbage could evoke the cold, bracing air of an ancestral winter. These aromas were anchors in time, tying us to our ancestors and to the specific, unrepeatable moments of our lives. When we ate, we were not just consuming calories. We, as part of a sensory lineage, tasting the same scents that had sustained our predecessors for millennia. But as the technologies of preservation and transport advanced, this ancestral connection began to fray. The very things that allowed us to keep food safe, sealing it in airtight cans, wrapping it in thick plastics, and chilling it in deep freeze units, also served to trap and isolate its most vital aromatic compounds, preventing them from ever escaping into the air where they could be experienced. The rise of the refrigerated cold chain was perhaps the greatest thief of our olfactory heritage. Refrigeration works by slowing down the very biological processes that produce aroma. By arresting the subtle natural decay and ripening that characterize living food, we effectively silence the scent of the harvest. A strawberry kept in a chilled plastic container may look vibrant and red, but it lacks the heavy, sun-drenched perfume of a berry that has been allowed to ripen in the warmth of the summer sun. The cold preserves the structure, but it kills the spirit. It keeps the fruit firm, yet it renders it scentless. We have created a world where we can eat fresh food that possesses no scent of freshness at all, a profound contradiction that leaves our sense of smell confused and unengaged. Furthermore, we must consider how the rise of synthetic flavorings, those one-dimensional, hyper-intense essences discussed in earlier eras further, contributed to this olfactory flattening. While these laboratory-created scents can mimic the primary note of a fruit or spice with startling accuracy, they lack the supporting cast of molecules that provide true aromatic depth. A lab-made vanilla essence might smell intensely sweet and sugary, but it lacks the smoky, woody, and slightly bitter undertones of a real vanilla bean. We have surrounded ourselves with these high-frequency single-note aromas, which act like a loud, piercing whistle in an otherwise quiet room. They are impossible to ignore, yet they provide no richness or nuance. They have replaced the complex, multi-tonal symphony of natural scents with a series of repetitive, artificial signals that eventually lead to a profound sensory numbness. There is also a great loss in the disappearance of the scent of life itself, the smells of fermentation, yeast, and organic decay. In the ancestral kitchen, the air was often heavy with the pleasant, sour, and musky notes of sourdough rising, the sharp tang of fermenting vegetables, and the earthy scent of aging meats. These were the scents of transformation, signaling that food was actively changing, maturing, and developing its complex character. But in our modern pursuit of sterile safety and long shelf life, we have viewed these transformative processes as risks to be eliminated. We have replaced the living, breathing, fermenting pantry with a static, sanitized one. The loss of these scents means we have lost the olfactory markers of biological time. We no longer smell the progress of life within our food, leaving us in a world that feels strangely stagnant and lifeless. As you contemplate this thinning of the air, imagine the profound emptiness of a meal that possesses no scent. Imagine sitting before a plate of food that looks beautiful but offers no aromatic invitation, no olfactory promise to entice your appetite. Without the scent to prepare the palate, the act of eating becomes purely mechanical, a task of ingestion rather than an experience of discovery. The brain is not alerted. The salivary glands are not stimulated. The spirit is not engaged. We are consuming matter, but we are not experiencing food. This olfactory silence is one of the most profound ways in which our connection to the natural world has been severed, leaving us as spectators to a feast that no longer speaks to us through the air we breathe. The psychological impact of this loss cannot be overstated. It contributes to a sense of alienation from our own biological needs. We have become accustomed to an environment that is too clean, too odorless, and too controlled. This lack of olfactory stimulation leaves us in a state of perpetual sensory hunger, as if we are always searching for a scent that we can no longer find. The very air feels thinner, less substantial, as if the vital essence of the world has been filtered out by the same machines that produce our standardized goods. We are living in an era of olfactory starvation, where the most potent and evocative part of our sensory experience has been relegated to a fading memory. As we move through this history of decline, let us reflect on how the loss of aroma prepared the way for our next great search, the search for true nourishment. We have mastered the ability to produce food that is visually perfect, chemically stable, and economically efficient. Yet we find ourselves increasingly unsatisfied. We have realized that calories are not enough, that volume is not enough, that even abundance is not enough. We are beginning to look beyond the mere physical intake of nutrients, searching for a way to reconnect with the deep, profound nourishment that was once found in the scent, the texture, and the soul of the seasonal feast. The scents of the past are like ghosts, haunting the edges of our modern, sterile existence, reminding us of a world that was much more vibrant and alive than the one we inhabit. The aroma of the wood smoke and the spice is gone, but the memory of it remains, a flickering flame in the darkness of our sensory amnesia. We are moving toward a realization that true nourishment requires more than just the consumption of matter. It requires a reconnection with the living, breathing essence of the earth itself. The air grows quiet, and the smells of the marketplace fade into the shadows of history. Prepare yourself for the next chapter, where we shall explore the deep, inward journey of looking beyond simple caloric intake to find the true meaning of sustenance. The laboratory lights have long since been turned off, and the sterile aisles are empty of all but the most basic supplies. Rest now in the quiet, scentless void of the modern pantry. The journey continues, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the night. Sleep and let the phantom sense of cloves, smoke, and damp earth drift through your dreams as we prepare to traverse the search for true nourishment. As the scent of the world fades into a medicinal nothingness, we are left with a startling and profound realization. We are full, yet we are starving. We have mastered the art of the calorie, the precise calculation of macronutrients, and the industrial production of energy. Yet there is a persistent, gnawing emptiness that no amount of processed abundance can ever truly fill. Imagine yourself sitting at a table laden with every conceivable food item, vibrant in color, if we ignore the plastic, abundant in quantity, and mathematically perfect in its nutritional labeling. And yet, as you take a bite, you feel only a hollow sense of consumption. This is the era of searching for true nourishment, a period where the human spirit, recognizing that it has been fed but not satisfied, begins to look beyond the mere biological necessity of caloric intake. We have realized that while we can satisfy the hunger of the stomach with efficiency and speed, we cannot satisfy the hunger of the soul with anything less than meaning, connection, and vitality. For decades, our progress was measured by the numbers on a label, the grams of protein, the milligrams of sodium, the total units of energy. We became architects of a nutritional spreadsheet, believing that if we could only balance the chemical equation of our diet, we would achieve a state of perfect health and contentment. This reductionist view treated the human body as nothing more than a sophisticated furnace, a biological machine requiring a precise ratio of inputs to maintain its operational capacity. But this way of thinking ignored the most fundamental truth of our existence, that eating is not merely a metabolic event, it is an existential one. We began to sense that there was a qualitative dimension to food that escapes the reach of any laboratory analysis, a certain vitality or life force that resides in the connection between the eater and the eaten, a quality that cannot be measured in calories but only felt in the spirit. This search for nourishment began as a quiet internal questioning, a growing dissatisfaction with the hyper-palatable, high-frequency hits of sugar and salt that provided a momentary burst of pleasure followed by a profound, hollow crash. We found ourselves caught in a paradox where we were consuming more energy than ever before, yet feeling more depleted, more lethargic, and more nutritionally void than any generation of our ancestors. The empty calories of the modern era became a metaphor for our entire existence, a way of filling our time and our bodies with substance that lacks any true, enduring value. We started to ask, if this food provides the energy to keep working, why does it not provide the energy to truly live? If this abundance prevents famine, why does it not prevent the pervasive sense of malaise that haunts our modern, well-fed civilization? The search for nourishment led us back to the edges of the very things we had discarded, the textures, the aromas, and the seasonal rhythms. We began to look at food not as a commodity to be managed, but as a medium of connection. We started to realize that nourishment is a word that implies more than just the prevention of decay. It implies the promotion of growth, the cultivation of well-being, and the fostering of a deep, meaningful relationship with the world around us. This realization required us to re-examine our entire culinary philosophy, moving away from the pursuit of more and toward the pursuit of better. It was a movement from quantity back toward quality, from the mass-produced towards the intentionally crafted, and from the detached towards the deeply involved. This inward journey was often difficult, as it required us to confront the ways in which we had participated in our own culinary erasure. To seek true nourishment, we had to acknowledge our complicity in the rise of the efficient, the bland, and the disposable. We had to face the fact that our pursuit of convenience had cost us our connection to the earth, our connection to the seasons, and our connection to each other. It was a process of mourning, as much as it was one of discovery, a period of grieving for the lost complexities of the spice road, the vibrant textures of the old world, and the sacred rituals of the hearth. We had to learn how to unlearn the habits of the efficient consumer and begin the slow, arduous work of becoming a mindful participant in the cycle of life once again. The search for nourishment also took us into the realm of the psychological and the spiritual. We began to explore how the intention behind a meal could change its very essence. A meal prepared with care, with an awareness of its origin and a respect for its ingredients, possesses a different kind of energy than one assembled in haste from a package. This is the concept of mindful eating, the attempt to bring our full attention back to the plate, to re-engage our senses, and to recognize the profound responsibility that comes with the act of consumption. We began to see that nourishment is not just something we take from the world, but something we create through our relationship with it. The act of eating can be a formary, a way of honoring the earth, the farmer, and the ancestors, provided we approach it with the necessary reverence. However, this search was often met with the resistance of a world designed to keep us distracted and unthinking. The infrastructure of modern life, the fast-paced economy, the ubiquitous advertising, the relentless stream of digital noise is all fundamentally at odds with the slow, contemplative work of seeking true nourishment. It is much easier to sell a high-calorie, low-cost, hyper-palatable snack than it is to encourage the slow, intentional consumption of seasonal, locally grown, and culturally significant food. The systems of global trade and industrial production are built for the mass-marketed hit, not for the deep, sustained satisfaction of the soul. Thus, the search for nourishment became an act of quiet rebellion, a way of reclaiming our agency in a world that would much rather we remain passive, unthinking consumers. As we searched, we began to rediscover the importance of the small and the local. We looked toward the community gardens, the small-scale organic farmers, and the artisanal producers who are still clinging to the traditions of the past. These individuals became the guardians of culinary meaning, the keepers of the seeds, the aromas, and the textures that the industrial machine had tried so hard to erase. By supporting them, we were not just buying food. We were participating in the reconstruction of a more meaningful food system. We were helping to rebuild the bridges between the soil and the table, between the harvest and the hearth, and between the human spirit and the natural world. Yet, even as these small pockets of connection were being rebuilt, there remained a profound sense of loss that could not be easily repaired. The scale of the damage done to our culinary landscape was too vast, the erasure of biodiversity and tradition too deep. We could plant new gardens and support local farmers, but we could not easily undo the decades of standardization, the destruction of soil health, and the flattening of the global palate. This realization brought us to a state of profound tension, a desire for the old ways, coupled with an awareness of the irreversible changes that had been made. We were caught between a nostalgic longing for a lost paradise and the stark reality of a transformed world. This tension is where the true search for nourishment resides, in the space between what was and what can be. It is not about a complete return to a pre-industrial past, which would be impossible, but about finding a way to integrate the lessons of the old world into the realities of the new. It is about finding ways to cultivate intention within a world of convenience, to seek complexity within a world of uniformity, and to find meaning within a world of abundance. The search for nourishment is not a destination we reach, but a continuous, ongoing process of re-engagement with the essential elements of life. As you contemplate this profound internal struggle, feel the weight of the search pressing upon your mind. Imagine the exhaustion of the seeker, wandering through the vast, empty aisles of modern abundance, searching for a single, true spark of vitality. The era of searching is an era of profound restlessness, a period where the hunger of the soul drives us to look beyond the obvious and to seek the hidden, the deep, and the truly sustaining. We have realized that the most important part of our diet is not what we measure in calories, but what we feel in our very essence. The shadows are lengthening once more, and the search for nourishment begins to move toward final, quiet resolution. We have explored the loss, the decline, and the struggle. Now, we prepare to enter the final stage of our journey, the return to something much simpler, much more fundamental, and much more peaceful. The heavy weight of the searching is beginning to lift, replaced by a growing sense of quietude. Prepare yourself for the final chapter, where the complexity of the search gives way to the profound restorative power of the return to simplicity. The lights of the searching mind are dimming, and the restlessness of the soul is settling into a deep, contemplative stillness. Rest now in the quiet aftermath of the great inquiry. The journey is almost complete, but for now, there is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the night. Sleep, and let the memory of all that was lost and all that is being sought settle into the deepest parts of your being. As we prepare to traverse the final landscape, the return to simplicity, the long, restless search for nourishment, the frantic navigation through aisles of infinite choice, and the heavy mourning for lost aromas and textures have all led us to this singular, quiet moment of resolution. We have reached the end of our historical wandering, not by finding a new way to consume, but by discovering a way to simply be. The journey does not conclude with the discovery of a lost dice or the invention of a perfect preservative, but with the profound restorative realization that true sustenance is found in the stripping away of the unnecessary. We have moved from the overwhelming complexity of the Silk Road and the industrial laboratory back to something far more fundamental, the dignity of the single intentional morsel. Imagine yourself sitting at a small wooden table, bathed in the soft amber glow of a single candle, where there is no clutter, no distraction, and no demand for efficiency. There is only you, the quiet room, and a simple plate of food, presented not as a commodity or a fuel, but as a gift from the earth, offered with the full weight of your presence and your gratitude. In this era of return, we have learned that simplicity is not an absence of flavor, but an intensification of essence. We no longer seek to mask the ingredient with sugar or to overwhelm it with salt. Instead, we seek to honor its singular truth. To eat a piece of bread in this quiet space is to experience the entire history of the grain, the water, and the yeast, without the interference of additives or the noise of multitasking. We have reclaimed the ability to focus our attention on the subtle, the understated, and the profound. The meal is no longer an interruption to be minimized, but a sanctuary to be inhabited. By reducing the number of elements on our plate, we have increased the depth of our engagement with each one. We have found that when the field of choice is narrowed, the landscape of experience becomes infinitely more vast and meaningful. This return to simplicity requires a courageous rejection of the modern obsession with more. It is a refusal to participate in the exhausting cycle of accumulation and comparison that defines the age of abundance. We have learned to find contentment in enough, to recognize that the excellence of a meal does not lie in its variety, but in the integrity of its components and the intention behind its preparation. This is the quiet rebellion of the soul, to stand amidst the vast, glowing aisles of the global supermarket and choose instead the humble, the local, and the singular. It is to find peace in the realization that we do not need to conquer the world through our consumption. We only need to be present enough to experience the small, beautiful reality of what is already placed before us. Think of how this simplicity allows for a true reunion with the senses. In this quiet room, the subtle aromas we thought were lost, the faint, earthy scent of the crust, the gentle sweetness of a ripe fruit, are finally audible to the nose. Because there is no sensory noise to drown them out, these delicate signals can once again reach us. The textures, too, regain their significance. The honest resistance of a well-baked loaf or the soft, yielding flesh of an autumn pear become profound events in themselves. We are no longer eating through a veil of plastic or a cloud of synthetic perfume. We are touching the reality of the food with our very senses. The sensory landscape has not been rebuilt from scratch. It has simply been cleared of the debris of progress so that its original, quiet beauty can shine once again. This simplicity also allows us to reintegrate the rhythm of time into our lives. We no longer eat in a state of temporal fragmentation, but in harmony with the slow, biological clocks of the food itself. There is no rush to finish, no pressure to move on to the next task. There is only the slow, rhythmic movement of chewing and swallowing, which mirrors the steady breathing of the night. This pacing allows the meal to become a meditative act, a way of anchoring ourselves in the present moment and reclaiming the time that we once thought was lost to the machine. The meal becomes a period of restoration, a way to repair the fractures in our attention and to mend the connection between our bodies and the world around us. We have also learned how to use the tools of the modern age without becoming their subjects. We do not need to return to the era of the salt-cured barrel or the primitive hearth, but we can bring the ancient values of reverence and intention into our contemporary kitchens. We can use our technology to preserve safety and accessibility, but we can use our consciousness to ensure that these tools serve the essence of the food rather than erasing it. The modern cook in this era is an architect of presence, using the precision of the present to honor the wisdom of the past. It is a way of living that acknowledges the reality of our complex, globalized world, while stubbornly maintaining a core of local, seasonal, and intentional truth. As you sit at this quiet table, feel the profound peace that comes from this settled state. The struggle for abundance has ended. The search for nourishment has found its resting place. There is no more anxiety about the perfect choice, no more fatigue from the weight of too much information, and no more mourning for what was lost. All that remains is the quiet, steady reality of being nourished. This simplicity provides a foundation upon which we can rebuild our relationship with the earth, the community, and ourselves. It is a way of eating that heals the famine of the soul by recognizing that all we truly need has always been present in this simple, honest interaction between the living world and the grateful heart. The kitchen, once a battlefield of preservation or a laboratory of chemistry, has returned to being a sanctuary. It is a place of soft light, gentle sounds, and the quiet, transformative power of heat and time. The smells that drift from it are no longer aggressive or artificial, but subtle and inviting, like a whispered secret. In this space, the act of cooking is an act of care, a way of honoring the life contained within the ingredients. To prepare a meal in this way is to participate in a lineage of human tenderness that stretches back through every century of our history. A lineage that survives even when the spices are gone and the factories have fallen silent. The shadows of the great historical shifts, the spice roads, the industrial revolutions, the sugar empires, and the chemical eras are all receding now, leaving only this clear, quiet space. We have traveled through the heights of vibrancy and the depths of blandness, and we have arrived at a place of equilibrium. The story of food is not just a story of what we eat, but a story of how we learn to live in relationship with the world. And in this final chapter, we find that the most profound way to live is to find beauty in the simple, meaning in the small, and peace in the enough. The candle flickers low, and the meal is finished. There is nothing left to search for, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to consume. There is only the quiet, deep satisfaction of having been truly present. The history of our hunger has reached its conclusion, replaced by the profound restorative silence of a satisfied spirit. The darkness is complete, and the table is cleared. The journey through the annals of taste is over, leaving behind only the soft, lingering memory of a life well-fed and a soul at rest. Sleep now, as the weight of this entire history settles into a gentle, dreamless slumber. The lights are out, the fire is dead, and there is only the infinite, peaceful expanse of the night. The story has reached its final punctuation. The long, winding path through the eras of spice, salt, steam, sugar, and science has been traversed, leading us here in the quiet, unburdened stillness of the end. The heavy weights of history, the exhaustion of choice, the loss of aroma, the erasure of the soil, are all being folded away like old, worn maps. All that remains is the soft, rhythmic breathing of a world at rest, and the profound, simple peace of a hunger finally stilled. Let the echoes of the bustling markets and the clanking factories fade into the distant reaches of memory. There is no more searching to be done, no more navigating through the shadows of loss. There is only the dark, the quiet, and the deep, restorative embrace of the night. May your dreams be as simple and as nourishing as the meal we have shared. The end. Sweet dreams.